For anybody watching online, I'm Councillor Steve Bartlett, and it's my job to chair this BCP Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting. So a big welcome to those. So members, first of all, I'll go to housekeeping as usual, and Claire will give us housekeeping for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the car park at the front of the building. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Agenda item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, Claire? Thank you.
Thanks. We have apologies from Councillor Walters and Councillor Beasley, and Councillor Tarling is substituting for Councillor Walters at this meeting.
Thank you. So that takes care of agenda item 2. Agenda item 3, members, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disposable pecuniary interest or any other interest on any other items on the agenda? Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you. I have a family member who's an employee of BCP, so I'll be excusing myself from the pay and reward section.
Thank you. Councillor Waite.
Yes, I also have a family member who's a BCP employee, but we're not financially dependent on each other. I don't feel that it's the same kind of situation.
Okay, thank you very much. The others? Okay, members, thank you. Agenda item 4, confirmation of minutes and the 4A actions sheet. Members, does anybody have any comments on the minutes of the last meeting? If not, we'll take those as read. Okay, thank you. The action sheet, let's have a quick look at that. So, we have a minute number 28 on the meeting dated 27th of August, Council Budget Monitoring, where we asked for a report on capital. There is a report on capital in one of the reports we're seeing tonight, but it's not the sort of tabulated report that we normally see. I've spoken to Mr. Richardson, we've agreed that that can be presented at the Q3 outturn report. Yeah, with regard to online reporting, which was the meeting on the 1st of October, minute number 53 on the forward plan, where we talked about the online reporting through client reporting, customer reporting, and I have spoken to the director about that, and I think we're probably going to get a brief on that or a few words on that later on. So we'll leave that one until we discuss the forward plan a bit later on. Meeting date 21st of October, minute number 60, Blue Badge Service Update Report. We asked portfolio holder to write to the Department of Transport to raise concern outlined by the ONS board, blah, blah, blah. A letter was written to the Minister and a letter was received. I've just seen it this evening. But for the time being, we have received that letter. All I can say at the moment is that they're not actually actively considering raising the fee for blue badges at this point. But they did outline the digital online service that's available to blue badge applicants and how that can be managed by the council. So it did go part of the way to addressing some of the issues that we talked about at that particular meeting. Item minute number 61 on the same meeting date, 21st of October, the work plan. Potential working group on the CRM to be added to the board's work plan, which we have put it as a potential working group meeting for another day. Meeting date the 18th of November, overview of BCP Council consultation approaches, that a working group consider the consultation framework to be established, which is another thing we'll be talking about on the forward plan later on, another potential working group. The ONS Working Group, again on the 18th of November, Budget Working Group's findings and recommendations. We'll be talking about those this evening. They were included in one of the reports that we're making tonight, but effectively the working groups did say that they formed some recommendations, and the recommendations are either financial to the council or to the cabinet, I beg your pardon, or back to the various overview and scrutiny committees, and all of those will be dealt with at cabinet tomorrow. So I think we can say that action has been cleared. Chair and Vice Chair to agree items for the December meeting, which we have done, and that's now on the work plan. So that closes all the actions. Anybody got any questions on those? Okay, we'll move on. Public issues. Claire, do you have any public issues?
No public issues for this meeting, Chair.
Thank you. Which takes us to agenda item 6, which is the Community Safety Partnership Annual Report. Now, members, I've opened this meeting now for debate, but in view of the very large agenda that we've got this evening, and this being the only report for consideration tonight that is not subject to Cabinet or Council decisions tomorrow, I believed in order to give time to this very important agenda item and still leave us sufficient time in which to debate the other decisions coming up for tomorrow's Cabinet, I felt it was best to open this for debate, but then, with your agreement, to close it and put it on the agenda for the next meeting. But I do need your agreement to do that. And I hope you think that that's a sensible thing to do, given the extent of the agenda for this evening. Do I have your agreement, members, for that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is actually the Housing and Council New Build Programme. But if you don't mind, members, because we have a pressing matter and we have visitors here to discuss the Pay and Reward Programme, I'd like to bring that item on the agenda forward and to deal with that one now, with your agreement. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so Councillor Tarling's going to excuse himself from this item because of his declared interest. So, Pay and Reward. This is a paper that's going to Cabinet tomorrow, and I'd like to thank very much for John Hartley from Unison for coming this evening to present some thoughts on this. At very short notice as well. It's much appreciated. But I'm going to invite the portfolio holder, Councillor Hannah, to introduce the paper initially, and then I shall call upon Unison to give us a statement on their views. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I apologise for any hoarseness and any need to clear my throat as we go through? And I would like to both introduce the paper and to comment on some of the misinformation or misunderstanding that has taken place since the paper was published. The last time I was here, I was encouraging the board to support Cabinet in enabling letters to be sent to staff with their indicative salaries so that our unions could again ballot their members, and hopefully we could go ahead and implement the new fair pay structure that we are seeking to achieve. Unfortunately, GMB members have again rejected our offer, and that means we are back negotiating with both unions. The GMB representatives have been discussing with their members why they voted no, and we are already looking at the issues that have emerged to see if we can find ways of resolving them. Meetings between union representatives and our officers are continuing, and I would like to thank both sides for their continuing efforts. Ideally, we reach agreement. I understand that the unions would need to re-ballot their members even if representatives feel happy with what is agreed. If we can achieve a yes vote, we will heave a sigh of relief and the new pay structure can be implemented. The problem is that there are no guarantees, and there are inevitably budget limitations on any further improvements to the offer. The question that this report addresses is how we plan for the situation where another several months go by and we still do not have yes votes from both of our unions. The theoretical possibility of moving to what is known as dismissal and re-engagement has always been there, right from when the process started back in 2019. And it's worth remembering that the whole pay and reward process is to resolve the situation where staff doing the same jobs can be receiving different salaries, depending on which council they worked for before this council was created. In negotiating a fair pay structure, I think it's fair to say the focus has been on minimising the number of staff who would lose salary. That is now estimated to be just 9% of staff after the period of pay protection that is part of the proposed deal. That focus on those who would lose salary may have distracted attention from the fact that for the past 5 years, other staff have been receiving lower salaries than they would under the offer. I checked today, and as things stand, that is estimated to be 38% of our staff doing the same job as others, but being paid less. That is virtually 2 out of every 5 members of staff still waiting for a fair pay structure promised 5 long years ago. We had hoped at the start of 2024 that we had achieved a deal that all sides could agree on. Unison voted for it, the GMB voted against. We renegotiated, the unions balloted again, the same result. As requested in September, we sent out the letters to staff with their indicative salaries, the unions balloted again, the same result. And as I explained, we are back negotiating. The question is, for how long do we continue this cycle? As I said, it has long been understood that dismissal and re-engagement is the alternative to enable us to offer individual staff new contracts reflecting the deal negotiated to date. That was explained back in January to all of our staff as part of the communication setting out the overall package in what was being offered then. The recent letter from the Chief Executive to all of our staff did not threaten dismissal at Christmas as has been suggested, but explained that we needed to consider whether to begin the process that would ensure the new pay structure would be in place in 2026. That would allow the 38% of staff who deserve an increase in salary to receive that increase. For 47% of our staff, virtually half, they would simply transfer onto new contracts with no gain or loss. Those who stand to lose would be offered continuity at the same terms and conditions that their colleagues will have, with salary protection. No one will be dismissed without a new contract and continuity of employment available for them to transfer to. Dismissal and re-engagement has been compared to the action of P&O in 2022 when, with no notice, they dismissed 800 employees and hired cheaper agency staff. That was rightly condemned. Hard-working employees lost their jobs. There is no parallel. There is no intention that any of our staff will lose their job. P&O did not dismiss and re-engage. They just sacked their staff. Full stop. To cut costs. And that is the other major difference. We are not proposing to cut costs. In fact, we are already setting aside £1.64 million to add to our salary bill to cover the increased costs of pay and reward, because we value our staff and the work that they do. That is in our medium-term financial plan already. On timing, we could move through another round of negotiation, and if that is unsuccessful, instead then move towards introducing the new pay structure ourselves. There are steps that need to be taken first, and officers have rightly offered the alternative of following both routes simultaneously, so that if negotiations are unsuccessful, we can move more rapidly onto the new contracts without a yet further delay. The projected timescales of the two options are set out in the appendix to the report. I hope that this clarifies where we are. I also hope that with some goodwill on all sides, we can sort out the worst of the issues that GMB members are raising and get amicable agreement without the phrase dismissal and re-engagement ever being heard again. No one wants to go down that route, not least because it takes a lot of work to implement and there is a cost to that. Meanwhile, 2 out of every 5 of our staff are still waiting for us to keep the promise made to them 5 years ago. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Mr. Hartley, would you like to give a statement? Thank you.
Hi there. I just want to say that we're still negotiating and we believe there is an agreement to be reached prior to March 2025. Our preferred option is not to have dismissal and re-engagement at all and keep talking to reach that agreement. We do so in good faith. We have not seen the financial costs of a potential dismissal and re-engagement process referred to as an appendix in the report, but based on Unison's experience, we believe the cost could be £1 million. We believe this is better used to look at how we can fix any issues in the proposal working towards an agreement. The Employment Rights Bill is currently going through Parliament, which in part will end unscrupulous fire and rehire tactics. The bill will restrict an employer's ability to use fire and rehire by amending the law on unfair dismissal so that where employees are dismissed for failing to agree to a change in their contract of employment, or if an employer dismisses the employee to replace or to re-engage them on varied contractual terms, those dismissals will be treated as automatically unfair unless the employer can show evidence of financial difficulties that are affecting or where they're likely to affect their viability. The changes were to eliminate, prevent, significantly reduce or significantly mitigate the effects of those financial difficulties, and the need to make the change in contractual terms was unavoidable. We do not believe we have reached any of those points at the moment. And if the Council do move to option 2, early fire and rehire, Unison would challenge it industrially, politically and legally. It's also worth noting that the impact of the statement about dismissal and re-engagement has had a particular effect on staff in terms of their well-being and feeling like the employer is acting potentially in bad faith. In terms of the timescales, the difference between the two options is actually 3 months. So I think it's important just to put that in perspective. So that's all I wish to say on that.
Thank you, Mr. Hartley. Okay, members, before we go into a debate on the paper, 2 points I wish to make. The first point is that there is a confidential annex to the paper. If anybody feels that they need to go into the detail of that or mention anything about that, then we will have to go into a confidential session. The second point is that we're here to consider the recommendation in this paper. We're not looking to try to renegotiate, fix anything. That's not for us. Our responsibility is to look at the options that are placed in the paper and decide whether we support them or otherwise, or come up with an alternative recommendation. So if you could just bear that in mind when you're asking questions. And if you do have any questions you'd like to put to Mr. Hartley, I'm sure he'd be delighted to answer them. But if you could just not ask him directly, if you wouldn't mind asking those questions through myself. I just need to make sure that we keep it on track, because it could easily go off track, I think. So having said that, members, I'll open the debate. Councillor Savin.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to address something that the Unison representative just covered in his speech, which was the the difference between option 1 and option 2, which is 3 months, struck me. Sorry, am I mumbling? I'll speak more clearly. So it struck me when I was reading the papers that the difference between option 1 and option 2 is 3 months. So I'd just like to ask why option 2 is recommended when it does appear that that's not a huge amount of difference, and option 1 would demonstrate that the council was attempting to take every possible step before moving on to a circumstance which, as Councillor Hannah has said, is one that nobody wants. That's my question.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. I think the answer is very much trying to get things in place for staff who deserve the fair pay structure as soon as we can possibly achieve that. I don't have any other specific rationale for putting it forward in those terms, but what I would say is, whilst I have heard what Unison have said in terms of their response, all we're doing at this stage is putting steps in place in anticipation of a need that we hope will never arise. So we're not actually planning on going down that route, and that is not a decision that will be made tomorrow at Cabinet. We're simply putting the steps in place in case. So I would hope on that basis that unions would understand that no, we're not moving to dismiss and re-engagement immediately, but we're anticipating a possible issue, and both of us sitting side by side have already said that we're hoping that current negotiations will be successful and that will be totally avoided.
Thank you. Members? No one else? Okay. Councillor Aikenhead.
Okay, yes. So I'm actually quite disturbed to see what seems to be happening here. I do have some experience of union negotiations because I used to be on a union negotiating committee. So I have been in the room, and I do know that it's a very involved process, and a lot of thought goes into it on both the union and the management side. And I know how important it is to keep a good relationship within that meeting, and how things can go well or things can go wrong, depending on all sorts of things that have happened. It occurs to me that a lot of the staff who have voted no may be unhappy, not just about the actual detail of the pay itself, but also about the journey that they have had to go through. Sometimes it's very difficult to think about what things are like from the point of view of the member of staff who's now spent quite a lot of time not knowing if they've got a job or not knowing if they're going to be made redundant, not knowing whether their pay is going to go up or whether it's going to go down, having a new job evaluation system that their job's being evaluated against, and that was brought in without an awful lot of consultation. So I think that there's a lot of difficult history to this, and I would say that it's very tempting in that case to think, well, if we now say we've got to reach agreement quickly, otherwise we're going to do this fire and rehire, it puts a bit of pressure on the unions to come and agree. And that is a viable tactic to use. But I don't think in this case it's a very good tactic to use, because I think in this case the staff they are already feeling annoyed. And this is where you heard from the union rep there, just talking about fire and rehire is actually making it more difficult for you to come to agreement. And that actually what needs to happen really here is for the unions and the management team to really get their heads together and recognise that the council yeah, the union wants all those people who need a pay rise to get it. The council wants it as well. You all want the same thing. It shouldn't be that difficult to come to some agreement. But what we don't need is pressures and threats and the idea that you've got hanging over you, if we don't get it done by this date, then we're just going to fire you and rehire you. So it doesn't really matter. We don't need to get an agreement with you because we can just fire and rehire at the end. Although actually, I won't go into the detail of what's in the appendix, but I can see that fire and rehire is not a cheap option. So it really, the council should be avoiding it as much as possible. But the staff can't see those figures, so they don't know that. I don't understand why you need to go for an option that starts preparing now for fire and rehire. I don't understand why the cabinet needs to decide that tomorrow, when I think all that will do is make it more difficult for you to come to agreement. Whereas what you really need to be doing is concentrating on making sure you do get that agreement. Because in the end, fire and rehire is what happens when the company has failed or the organisation has failed to reach agreement with the unions. And I believe in this case, both the council and the unions are all being very reasonable. They're all reasonable people. You can come to agreement. You do not need to fire and rehire. You do not need to send out a message that you think that's something that employers should do. If you go down this route of firing people and rehiring them, what will that do to staff morale? What will that do to customer service? Because those staff that now have lower morale are the ones that are dealing with our residents. And we have to look at this from the point of view of our residents. What do our residents benefit from us doing a fire and rehire exercise? Nothing. Their council tax pays for it. They get no better customer service from it. They get unhappy council staff. So I would say from the point of view of the residents that we represent, we should not be talking about doing this now. We should be concentrating on getting the agreement that I know that we can get. I'd like to formally propose that we recommend to the Cabinet that they do not start going down any process of preparation for fire and rehire, because this is detrimental to staff morale, may affect the service that our residents get. And I'd like to formally move that.
Are you proposing that we go to option one? It's a lot simpler.
Yeah.
So there's the two options.
No, I'm proposing that we don't. The Cabinet can decide what they're going to do, but I would like to propose that we do not start any preparations, that the Council sends a strong message that fire and rehire is not something that responsible employers do, and we're not going to do it. If someone wants to amend that, they can.
Okay, I think you, if you want to put that recommendation, I think we're going to have to put it slightly more succinctly. I'll just let you have a minute to think about that.
Okay.
There are a couple of people that want to. Well, first of all, let me just ask: is there a seconder for that motion based on what's been said at the moment? Fine, go ahead.
I don't want to jump in over other people, but I need to clarify a little bit with Sue.
Okay.
Before I would be prepared to second anything.
Okay, just a moment.
Is that all
then.
right if I do that?
Well, you're gonna have to do it in open forum, I'm afraid.
No. I'm just trying not to dominate.
Please go ahead then.
Just to clarify, because there are two options in the paper. There's option one, which is don't trigger the process by which could lead to dismissal and re-engagement, or option two, which is do. Are you willing to propose that we recommend option one? That's my question.
I think I'm looking at option one, and I'm a little bit unsure of how things go at the end of it, but I certainly prefer it to option 2. So yes, I am willing to propose that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we have a move to propose to recommend to Cabinet that they decide on option 1, and that's been seconded by Councillor Salmon. So we'll open that for debate now. Does anybody wish to speak on that motion? Councillor Canavan, did you want to come in at this point? Okay, all right. Okay, you've got your hand up. Councillor Wade. Thank you.
Could you let me know how many staff are union members and... Oh,
Yeah, it's on.
am I on?
Yeah.
I'd just like to know how many staff are union members, and if we got a sense of like the numbers that are actually voting against this, because it just seems that the whole staff are being held to ransom by a few. I mean, is that fair or?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think I asked my question. I'd like to put it to Sarah, if that's okay.
Sure. Okay.
Hello there. Thanks for the question. Just
Well,
to...
just introduce yourself, Sarah, would you, please?
Sorry, just introduce myself.
Yes, please.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sarah Dean, Director of People and Culture. Just to answer the question, we don't know for sure the numbers because the trade unions aren't obliged to share that information with me. We've got an indication of the size of membership based on sort of other means, but our assumption would be the same as the point that you made, that the numbers probably that we're talking about in respect of the GMB union membership may be relatively small in terms of the numbers of people that we're sort of finding are slipping us into the side of rejection, but we can't know for absolute sure.
Just a point of clarification, Councillor Canavan, I know you wanted to speak. I didn't know if you wanted to speak before the vote or you wanted to wait and see how the vote went. Is that what? Wait and see if it's... Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any more comments you wish before? Okay, I just have a couple of points. The first point is that if there is any damage done by proposing that those arrangements under option 2 are put in place now, then I'm afraid the damage is done. It's now too late for that. You're not going to prevent that. That will have affected, I'm sure, the morale of some staff. So the other point I would make, and I do understand the issue about there being a 3 months difference. Now, given the duration that the negotiations are going on, in terms of the number of years, 3 months actually is a very short frame. And if we were discussing this before the paper had come out, I'd be saying, well, actually, probably we should hold off on option 2. Let's just see where we go in terms of that negotiation and see where that takes us. But they have now been tabled, and so we've got a sort of a binary choice here, haven't we? So I'm thinking, the damage has already been done in terms of morale, and that by even suggesting hire and fires there. So I really am between a devil and a hard place on this one, I have to say. So anyway, I'll let you make your own minds up on this. If there's no more discussion about this, I'm going to put this to the vote.
I think that I can speak after, was because I moved the proposal.
Okay, yeah.
And I would like to just answer some of the concerns.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand going out there, Councillor Hannah, but okay. Councillor Aikenhead wants to come in, and then we'll come back to you as portfolio holder. Thank you.
Just wanted to answer some of the concerns. I don't believe this is a matter of a few people holding for ransom, because you have a union rep here from the union who actually agreed, but still their members would still be subject to the fire and rehire as well. And I think that what we're not saying, we're not preventing anyone from coming to agreement sooner than that 3 months. All we're saying is give it 3 months longer. There is nothing preventing the agreement being made next week if people get together and make it. So it's not about definitely taking longer about it. It's about taking the time to make sure, and also taking the negotiations seriously. I don't believe the damage has all been done. Some damage has been done, but I think it's a lot more damaging to actually do fire and hire than it is to just threaten it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I say that I agree with an awful lot of what Councillor Aikenhead has said, in particular in terms of the difficulties for staff in sitting through the process for the past years and the ups and downs, and alongside that the fact that we as a council have had to deal with staffing issues of a totally other kind in terms of needing to make savings in our budget, and those decisions have been equally uncomfortable. So I totally share what she's saying in those terms. It's not my intention to argue for or against the recommendation that Councillor Aikenhead has moved. It is my role and Cabinet's role to listen to what this board would like to say, so we will do that. But may I just say two things. One is, when it comes to the 3 months, in inverted commas, that is not a fixed period of time. If it became clear that it was worth continuing negotiations in order to achieve agreement, then I'm sure both sides would be very happy to continue talking and get that agreement achieved. So there is no fixed period, that was an indicative period. And secondly, Councillor Aikenhead described what's in the report as being a negotiating tactic to put pressure on the unions. It's far from that. That was not the intention. The intention is to negotiate openly with the unions, try to form agreement. The thought behind the paper was that if we can achieve things sooner for those staff who are waiting for fair pay, then we might want to do that. But that is still a decision on which you will make your views known and Cabinet will consider tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, members. Anybody else? In that case, I'm going to put this to the vote. All those in favour of the motion for us to recommend to Cabinet that they go for option 1.
1, 2, 3, 4 in favour.
Okay, those against?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against.
Okay, so that motion is lost. And
I'd like to ask a question.
yes,
The
go on.
officer.
Go on.
So is now that that's been lost, obviously we're not making, unless we have another one, we're not making a recommendation to Cabinet. Can I just ask, does Cabinet make this decision themselves, or does it go to full council tomorrow night?
Chief Executive?
Sorry, Chairman, can you just bear with us as we have a
Yes, please do, yeah.
short discussion on that
Sure.
issue? Thanks.
Okay.
I'll come to you in a minute, Councillor Broadhead. Chief Executive, whilst you're discussing this, I'm not pressing you, but Councillor Canavan wanted to come in if that vote had been lost. So I'm going to give him the opportunity to come in now, and you can carry on that. Councillor Canavan, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity of being able to speak. So collective bargaining, I always used to describe when I was doing it as a day job as an art, not a science, because it's about people. It's about people's, not only people's livelihoods, but it's about their families' livelihoods too. And the whole idea of pay and reward in the first place, as has been mentioned, was to eliminate inconsistencies, let's call them that, within the pay structure. We have seen in other local authorities, like Birmingham, the cost to that local authority of equal pay claims. It is potentially huge. And as someone who's dealt with that in the past, it's seriously not a road you want to go down. Now, Councillor Hand is right about one thing, and that is that the issue of dismissal and re-engagement has been there from the start. What I think he fails to appreciate is just how concerning that has been to staff throughout this process, because it's been there, hovering in the background all of this time. And I think there have been a number of factors that have led to the outcome of the ballots that we've seen. And, you know, some of those were avoidable, some of them not so much. But the issue of trust and confidence really looms extremely large. So if you think there wasn't any damage done as a result of having that in the background, that would be a mistake. If you think there wasn't any damage done by the fact that a number of job profiles were allocated incorrectly, that would be a mistake. But what would also be a mistake, coming back to your point, Chair, is that it's not irrevocable. You can move back from it. You've missed an opportunity by going to option one, and I'll be pitching up at Cabinet tomorrow to put my 5p within. But you're in a situation now where you're actually quite close to a deal, because I've had the good fortune of speaking to colleagues in Unison and the GMB. So I've seen what the GMB have put to the employer as what they see as the key issues which they're needing to resolve. And it strikes me that that deal is quite close. Now you might think, well, we've been saying that for months, but collective bargaining is like that. Sometimes it takes a small thing to shift it. And one of the things that can shift it is is trying to repair that trust and confidence. With the option of dismissal and re-engagement or fire and rehire, whatever one you want to call it, on the table, it will damage industrial relations within BCP. You're in a situation now where GMB already has a mandate for industrial action. I think it's probably technically legally expired, but it could easily prompt and it could easily generate a new ballot. And it would also be a mistake to think that if they had a new ballot, it would be any different to the previous one. And it doesn't matter how many union members there are, because it will damage the authority. It will damage the operation of the authority. It will damage the morale of staff. And that needs to be repaired. So in terms of a solution, Chair, you have to repair that trust and confidence that staff, or some of the staff, have lost in the employer. And I think you've got the ability, with a team in place, to be able to do that, both with the employees represented and the trade unions represented. And I think you really need to give that a good go. But take fire and rehire off the agenda completely, because it is damaging and is really not helping to resolve the situation going forward. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Chief Exec.
Thank you, John. Apologies for the delay in coming back to you. We believe the wording is such that the Cabinet can approve the recommendation that is in front of them. However, before we actually carried out a dismiss and re-engage exercise, we would probably need the approval of Council to do that as the ultimate employer. So this is to commence the proceedings. That's within Cabinet's gift. If we, and we make it really clear, we all absolutely hope that we wouldn't get to that point, but if we had to commence dismiss and re-engage, then that exercise would need council approval, is the advice.
Thank you.
On the back of that.
Yep.
I have another question. I'll ask it, and you'll have to let me know if this is a problem for discussing in open business. I would find it useful to know if the Cabinet make this decision, how much money is likely to be spent on this preparation before it goes to full council. Because my purpose in asking that is because if it's a lot of money, then we perhaps should be asking that it goes to full council tomorrow. But if it's a very small amount of money, then it makes sense not to request that.
I think what you're asking for is different from the confidential, the information in the confidential report. It's a different amount of effort.
Yeah.
So I think, is that one for you, Councillor Hannah, or would you defer that to officers?
I'm afraid that is not for me.
No, I didn't think so.
I haven't asked for that figure, so I
Okay.
have to leave it with officers.
Councillor Porthead, did you want to come in on anything? Your hand up was earlier on, but whilst discussing that, you may like to.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, Councillor Aikenhead has stolen much of my thunder. I was going to ask a very similar question around whose decision this actually was, because a number of us brought this pay and reward decision a few months ago to the committee. We had to do it via call-in because it was described as being the final offer from the council at the time, and it hadn't had any scrutiny, and a number of us had concerns that actually this should have been a full council decision. We heard at the time from the cabinet member that trying to assert that this was a decision from the previous administration, but I've checked and double checked, and this final position was not a previous cabinet decision. The first time this came to cabinet was quite recently. Until then it had been an officer driven process, and so it is, you know, the very first time that this final structure came to any councillors was at the cabinet a few months ago. We had a response from officers then that wasn't a full council decision, because even though it was over the financial threshold, it was spread over a number of years. I think a number of us challenged that because that's not how we'd previously taken decisions. It was a compound effect that triggered it as a key decision. But I'm hearing now that this will only go to cabinet essentially if the council follows through with the decision to fire and rehire. But I'm just a bit confused because the option 2, which now seems to be Cabinet's preferred option, starts that collective consultation, I think, immediately. So similar to Councillor Aikenhead, it would be good to find out what costs initially are incurred as part of that process, and if added to the previous Cabinet decision, whether that would trigger a key decision. The reason for asking this is that this is clearly a very important decision that affects a huge number of people throughout the council. And it seems to me to be way too big a decision to be taken purely by Cabinet alone, especially considering what we've seen over the last few weeks. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Porthead. Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you. Yeah, so we were just referring to the flowchart in terms of option 2 and the approximate timescales that we'd given in the flowchart. The project team are currently funded for the period within this financial year, and that includes the process of collective consultation that Councillor Broadhead's just referred to. So we think that probably April time, in terms of looking at the flowchart, is when we would be looking potentially to move to the next stage in the process if we hadn't been successful in reaching agreement. And that would probably be then the time that we would know that we were going on a different process, therefore it would incur additional costs for us at that point.
So it would go to full council before we started incurring any additional costs to do it?
It could do, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, members, so I think we've probably come to a conclusion on the debate on this paper now. The motion was made. Unless anybody has got an alternative suggestion that they wish to, recommendation they want to make Cabinet, and if there is nobody that does, then I will move on to the next agenda item. Councillor Dedman.
Can I just ask, Chairman, will you be putting these deliberations to the Cabinet meeting tomorrow to show what we did discuss? Because otherwise it looks as though we have no recommendation and we've discussed it quite fully.
There is always the option of moving to support the recommendation that's in this paper, which is the opposite to what has actually occurred.
Well,
But you can, but I certainly can pass on the sentiments of the debate, which is what I always try to do anyway. Yeah.
well, all right, then I will propose that we support the recommendation that Cabinet have already seemingly put to themselves, which is recommendation 2, isn't it? Option 2.
Okay.
But I haven't got a seconder.
Do you have a seconder? Anybody wish to second that?
Yes.
Councillor Wade will second that.
I would second.
Is there any debate on that?
I would like.
Councillor Aikenhead?
Yes, I would just like to say that I think that actually it is a step further to say that you actually agree with option 2. That is a step further than just not saying anything at all. I believe that means that by voting for this, we'd be saying that you're happy about them doing a fire and rehire exercise. I would still like it to be conveyed to the Cabinet that this was something that was hotly debated and there was disagreement within the committee, because I certainly disagree with this proposal.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Broadhead?
Yeah, Chair, just very briefly, just to actually agree once again with Councillor Aikenhead, if members of this committee are essentially saying that they agree with the commencement of option 2, that is a flowchart, that is a process which the Council is intending to follow. It is a negotiating tactic as well, clearly, but members of this committee are then signing up to follow through with that, which includes the ability to hire and rehire, despite the fact that we've heard almost unwillingly through financial reasons alone that there may be a full council vote on this. So, I would urge colleagues to think very carefully about their vote. Thank you.
If you don't mind me just commenting on that, actually the process exists in both options. They just occur at different times. So, Councillor Trent.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think we could have very easily added into the previous proposal that we would regard the fire and hire as an absolute last resort. But by March 2026, when this is hopefully resolved, it would have been 7 years that the current situation would have existed. So I think it's been a huge delay, and it must be very difficult for those who have been working quite willingly against the background of not being paid the same as the other people doing the same job. I would support the proposal of just going along with the recommendation of option 2, because I just feel it needs to be got out of the way. And we've heard that the delay of the in option 1 could be 3 months, but it could be longer. But it might be that something like that kind of hits down the line anyway. But I really think we need to get this out of the way, because it is a long time for people to have been working with that uncertainty, and I still haven't really understood why it was that the GMB members rejected the proposal.
Okay, Councillor Trent.
But as I say, I just feel we need to move it along.
Okay, Councillor Wade.
Thank you. Yeah, my vote isn't saying anything that I'm not saying it is. So to reiterate again, nobody is in favour of hire and refire. It's simply I am in support of that 2 out of 5 staff who have been waiting too long for their realignment, and I see it as staff supportive, wanting to get this. I mean, yes, it's 3 months, but also we've been talking about it quite intensely for the last couple of months. It's kind of a very live issue, and people just want it moving forward and not hanging around month after month. I feel like we just need to get it done.
Thank you. Councillor Salmon, thank you.
Yes, I just would like to ask that my vote on this motion be recorded in the minutes, please.
Thank you.
I'd like mine too.
Okay, is there any more debate on that motion? Councillor Dedman.
If there's nobody else, I just want to wind up that I've proposed it, because I think Councillor Hannah described the situation very well and very moderately. And I think that there's been a huge amount of obfuscation about the situation, what will come to council, what won't come to council. And as I understand it, that will be sorted out properly, and what has to come to council will come to council. I'm confident about that. So my feeling about it is to recommend to the Cabinet this particular version of how we move forward. As Councillor Trent said, we've been, I mean, I've been with it all, you know, we've been going round in circles now since the beginning of this. We always knew it would be difficult, but we didn't know it would be this long.
Yeah.
So that's my reasoning behind it, Chairman. And
Okay.
I think we've, and
Thank you.
As the Vice Chairman says, we've all given it a huge amount of thought, and I think, yes, I think we've done it well. So yes,
Okay.
I stand
All
by
right,
my
thank you,
proposal.
Councillor Dedman. In that case, I'll now take it to the vote. So those in favour of that motion to recommend to Cabinet that we support the option 2.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favour.
And those against?
2 against
Abstaining?
and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. So that motion is carried. And with that, I'm going to close the debate on that paper. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you. So now we're going to go on to what was agenda item 8, which is agenda item 7, which is housing delivery, council new build housing and acquisition strategy update and harbour sale acquisition. Thank you for coming along this evening, Councillor Wilson, and I believe you've got with you Amina Martin. Have I pronounced that correctly? Amina, nice to see you. And also Nigel Bauer, who's Land and Partnership Manager. Good evening. Hi. Okay, Councillor Wilson, would you like to introduce the paper? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for accommodating me in having this item move forward on the agenda. I really appreciate as well this item being brought to scrutiny. This paper has 2 parts to it. Firstly, to provide an update to the Council's new build housing and acquisition strategy, more commonly known as the CNAS programme. And second is to recommend to the Council the acquisition of the Harbour Sale site, which is 32 leasehold flats as set out at Appendix 4, which, should we wish to discuss the financial details behind, we would have to go into exec session. as well as the approval to proceed with the acquisition of 16 homes by March 2026 as part of the Local Authority Housing Fund 3 programme, more commonly referred to as LAF 3. So I'm going to provide a brief update in terms of the CNAS programme. The main purpose of the CNAS programme is to help the council achieve its goal of giving everyone a safe place they can call home. When I took over the portfolio for housing and regulatory services last year, we had approximately 260 households in B&B accommodation. 140 of those 260 were families, meaning that in the run-up to Christmas last year, we had 220 children in B&B accommodation. I'm sure that you are aware that this is the most challenging type of accommodation to live in, particularly for families with children. There is no suitable cooking facilities, no place for a child to do their homework, no separate room for parents to get a moment's respite. It is the last resort, and our dependence on it is not only costly to the mental health and welfare of the families and individuals in B&Bs, but it is also very costly financially to the council. Weekly rates, as set out in the report, consist of £440 for a one-bedroom and £1,005 for a two-bedroom. So at the back end of last year, as a council, in agreement with the Homelessness Partnership, we decided that we needed to tackle this issue. So we decided to acquire proper homes as a form of temporary accommodation, initially identifying and requiring 80 properties. But as demand continued to escalate, a more accurate reflection of need was eventually settled on as around 110 properties. At paragraph 17 in the report, there is a summary of the acquisitions. The purchasing and letting of so many properties in such a relatively short period of time has not been without its challenges. It required three parts of the council to collaborate: housing needs, the voids team, and housing delivery. All of which I would like to thank for their work they've put into this. Going from acquiring less than 50 per year over the last 3 years to 3 times that amount in 1 year takes a huge amount of effort. So with some properties it has taken time for them to get to the standards that they can be used. I should also mention that it is not only these acquisitions but prevention work in housing options that has helped us substantially. We have had a 30% more successful prevention interventions than last year, in a context where actual increased demand has been around 30% in the service. So it is this work that has gone on with acquisitions alongside our prevention that has led to a significant reduction in our use of B&Bs as a form of temporary accommodation, leading to significant cost savings and cost avoidance to the council. And data has indicated that if we didn't do this, 274 households were projected to have remained in B&Bs in 25-26, which would be at an annual cost exceeding a staggering £10 million. And across the country, there are councils on the verge of bankruptcy because they've seen this issue too late and they have not been able to tackle it. But much more importantly, and what makes me proud of the work done, and I'm sure is what we're all here for as councillors, is that instead of 220 children spending Christmas in a B&B room, we are hoping that this year less than 30 will be. And whilst I believe that is still 30 too many, it is over an 80% reduction when nationally the trend is rising. And that is with more homes to still come online. One of which, hopefully, if approved by Cabinet, Audit and Governance and Council, will be the 32 homes at Harbour Sale. And they will make a positive impact on the families and individuals who otherwise would have been in B&B. So, in a tough context, both nationally and locally, this work and its outcomes is a silver lining, for sure. Although, let's be under no illusions, this is just a tourniquet, stopping the bleed. What is equally important is the delivery of new homes, and particularly truly affordable new homes coming to fruition. Without that, we cannot solve the housing emergency that we're in. And at Appendix 1, we give an update on the schemes within the current pipeline of the new build of this programme. A mix of small infill sites and larger key sites, including Constitution Hill, Princess Road and Hawkwood Road. Amongst, in total, within that pipeline, there are 543 homes, and that we currently have another 153 on site. Alongside this, we're also looking to work with registered providers, something that we haven't done a lot of in recent years, but that we know for a fact can be highly successful. We can get a registered provider to build out sites to our specifications, apologies. We would also hold the nomination rights for the council to give those on the housing register a brand new home. This approach would accelerate the speed of delivery and help us unlock difficult sites where registered providers have a bit more experience, increased resource and a different skill set in dealing with larger scale sites. This is an ongoing piece of work that we're exploring as an option. Outside of the report, We also have key regeneration sites. We're having really positive conversations with Homes England as we pitch them our vision and we look to them for support in seeing important strategic sites delivered. And these sites will be crucial in providing to our supply of housing across the conurbation. So while the market and conditions are really challenging to delivering, there are reasons to be optimistic. And I'm happy to open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Members, open that up for debate. No? My goodness me. Okay, then I'll kick it off. Councillor Broadhead. Okay, all right, I'll go ahead. Couple of questions for you. Yeah, and absolutely, it's really good news that we've been able to reduce the number of people in bed and breakfast. Absolutely. And we seem to be making good progress there. But there are some issues that you're well aware of, which I've already brought to your attention, and you'd be very surprised, I'm sure, if you didn't think I was going to mention it this evening, which I'm going to. But and that is that and this is reflected actually in the table that you see on page 516, which shows the current CNAS delivery, the acquisition programme. And in particular, the top line, which is the temporary accommodation acquisition stream, where we've acquired 105 properties, but of those 105, there's only actually 46 that have been let, which means, if my maths is anything like correct, 59 properties which are still empty, yet they've been purchased. And the concern, as you well know, is that I don't know how much those would have cost, those 59 properties, but could well have been in the order of £17 million, of which we're paying interest, and at the same time we're paying for those families that would otherwise be accommodating that to bed and breakfast. So we've got a double whammy there, basically. So for whatever duration those people are actually in bed and breakfast, we've got that expense. We've also got the cost of funding that capital purchase. So whilst the paper does mention this potential savings of bringing people out of bed and breakfast, there's more to this as well, because we're actually incurring a lot of costs, which isn't, and the capital investment is not yet realising the benefit of that investment. And what's concerned me is the capability of the organisation to turn itself on to actually hit those properties that require work in order to get them ready for a condition that can be let. And it sort of, when I thought about it, I wondered about how the organisation is actually set up to accommodate this, because it seems to me that the work is split in different directorates. So the question I've got for you, who's actually in charge of this? Who's responsible for making sure that the money is used effectively, the investment is realised efficiently, and the council costs can be reduced as far as possible, and at the same time get people out of bed and breakfast into these new properties that we own? It's a fairly big question, but when I see the fragmentation across the council about how this programme is being managed, I just wondered what actions are in place to make sure that it is a coordinated effort and everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet and looking at the same objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a fair challenge. I think this is obviously an area that you're very passionate about, and you've raised it with me, and I appreciate that, and I think it's been really useful. And there isn't a single person; it's everyone in the team's responsibility. You can't have anybody shirking that responsibility. We want to get these voids as quickly as possible, but when you are increasing the programme by such a level, there is obviously going to be a natural extension of time where these properties are going to be void. So my answer to that is it's everyone's responsibility. Obviously, myself as portfolio holder, Kelly Dean is the respective director who can't be here tonight, and Amina Matin obviously hold the primary responsibility, and then there's the operational responsibility of those who have been managing it in terms of the patents to voids team, and Nigel, who's been fantastic in acquiring all these properties in such a short space of time. So I wouldn't say it's one person's responsibility necessarily. It's all of our responsibility, and we take it very seriously. when there has been issues, we've been reallocating resources in order to try and speed up the void process of this program. You know, some of our standard work, our non-urgent repairs work within our one part of our program, is being reallocated to our voids in this space, because we want to get people out of temporary accommodation as quickly as possible, and we are doing so. That would probably be my answer. I don't know if any of my fellow officers want to come in, but
I'm happy to reassurance to members. I think on an operational level, there are lots of project teams that work on this across the 3 different services to try to make sure that we minimise the amount of time that property is void, and that's always our aim. There have been some significant challenges, because whilst we're reporting 137 properties being delivered this year, when all of it's completed and you want to compare like with like, it's going to be circa sort of 195, and the previous years we've delivered 30, 40 or 49 as a maximum. So it's been a significant increase. We could have said what we need to do, and this again with the benefit of hindsight, we could have set up a project team, we could have looked at resourcing, we could have resourced that. That equally would have taken a huge amount of time to mobilise all of that, and that would have delayed the consequential purchase. So, if you like, it was a conscious decision to say we need to act, and we need to act quickly so that we can acquire the properties. We liaised very closely with the Voids team in January, February to communicate the volume of properties that were coming forward, and tried to work through how that would best be managed. They've done an incredible job to turn around the properties that they have. I appreciate that our void time is reported within this paper as 131 days, which is not satisfactory if it was an ongoing problem. But it's not an ongoing problem. It's very specific to this year. Normally it would be far less than that, and a general void is normally turned around within a month, within a normal situation. We've also looked at when a property has remained empty, we've also looked at how we turn it around, because the difficulty with numbers is the detail that's held within it. So the 131 days includes the nomination time, and when we look at the LARF properties which are incorporated within these numbers, there's been significant delays with central government in the nomination process, because that's not done at a local level, that's done at a national level. So we've been sort of at their bequest as to when that may or may not happen. So Ben Tomlinson's team, working with Kelly, has said, well, that's property empty, can we swap them over? So we've then been generally swapping properties over. So if we've got 2 3-beds, we'll take a LARF 3-bed and say, well, let's make that TA, because that's ready to go, and we'll swap them round. So we've been trying to work in a dynamic way to deliver the best possible outcome. Notwithstanding, there's been mistakes and there have been some genuine delays. That would be my initial sort of overview of where we are.
Okay. Amina, did you want to say anything? No? No?
I was just going to echo my actually, from a director point of view, Matty, Kelly and I now regularly meet to look at the programme of work, and the team's turning out 10 properties a week, which is fantastic given the resourcing is spread across a number of property needs. So it's not just a TA void, there's a number of council requirements as well. So actually, in terms of the pressures, as Nigel said, we had growth in the acquisitions, and then consequently we've been working with the repairs and maintenance voids team to build up their capacity. So I think actually this is about monitoring, and we have got coordination within our team to support the work ongoing.
Thank you. I'll come to you in a minute, councillors. Yeah, just to come back on that, and please don't take this as criticism. My job is to test and challenge what's happening, and the figures themselves speak for themselves, and it's that data that generates the challenge to you. Because, and I think you've probably articulated some of the issues already about the lack of project management, and I have to say that maybe on reflection that may not have been the best choice, but this is an operational matter. It's for you to decide how you do it. But when you buy 111 properties that are not new, you expect there to be an effect before you can let them. And so the organisation, in knowledge of the money that's being borrowed to buy those, should gear itself up in a way to be able to manage that stream. So there are no surprises. You know where you're heading, you know how many you're going to do by a certain time, and you know what the objectives are. Just the feeling I'm getting is we've got them and we'll do the best we can. And everybody's trying their hardest, and I do accept that. But I just think from a project management perspective and how this all comes together in the council, I just wonder if it's had the project management attention that it ought to have had. But that's just a personal view, and I'm only using the data in front of me to use that. I think it was Councillor Macro first, was it? Yeah, and then it was Crispin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a question. I've just got a little anecdote or whatever to say to you. It was about this time last year that I and two fellow ward colleagues visited a lovely set of houses that had been. The original site had been totally flattened, and these houses were built up as passive house standard. Meeting with the resident, a mum of 2 children with special needs. She was absolutely delighted with her passive house. I've written some things down that I can remember as what was said. So she was totally grateful and very appreciative. And I saw good-sized bedrooms. And her home was so cosy. She was really taking a pride in her home. The children were settled, and as I said, due to having special needs, they needed stability because they had moved from cramped conditions that weren't ideal for children, particularly with special needs. And now they're thriving. So it was, you were there. Do you remember last year? Yes. So it was a lovely visit to have in my ward, and lovely to see that this mum was just so grateful. Thank you.
Nice to hear the other end of the story, and it's great to hear. Councillor Goodall.
Yeah, sorry, just a quickie. On the Constitution Hill site, that's paragraph 129. It says circa 98 homes in the pool area composed of 76 social rent, which is fine, I understand that. You also explain what temporary accommodation is, I understand that. There's 12 specialists, I don't know what that means. Could somebody tell me?
I think that's dependent. Obviously, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what that will be. Amina, did you have a...
It tends to be if there's a specialist, a severe housing need. It could range from extra care to there may be people who are homelessness who need more support in their accommodation. So it's designed around specific needs.
But the actual type hasn't been determined yet, has it? It's
no,
still in the
and
modelling
the
process.
Could be
yeah.
Affordable or social.
Can I just follow up? So do you know when the outline plans are going to be available for this yet? We can have a look?
I don't have any fixed time, but I'm happy as soon as I have them to share them with you.
I'd be very grateful.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Councillor Broadhead, and then I'm going to come to you, Councillor Salmon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a few points from me. First of all, can I just congratulate Councillor Wilson and the team for the work that they're doing on the CNAS project. I'm quite close to it. I set up the CNAS strategy, and whilst there's been some changes since we set it up, that was what the whole strategy was designed to do, to bend and flex and take account of the different needs at any given time. So I have no real issue with it whatsoever. And again, I think that's a real benefit of a longer term strategy, particularly when it's got a kind of project-led approach. I would just, as an aside, slightly caution. I mean, I know that part of the changes have seen a reduction in the investment in private rented sector, PRS. I would just say that PRS is a hugely in demand housing need as well, and also actually brings in quite good income for the council as well. So whilst I appreciate within the overall current envelope there's been a move away from PRS, I would always advocate actually increasing the envelope to invest more in that, because we know that there's a huge housing need for that as well. It shouldn't necessarily need to be a binary choice. I've just got 2 points, Chair. The first one was pretty much identical to you, and it was about these huge acquisitions that have been recently, and just having that assurance that that it was as being handled in the right way, because actually the report says that of the 269 homes acquired to date, there are actually 76 still unoccupied. But I think you've landed the point quite well, that it might just be a renewed focus on making sure that project management was in place, and if that pace of acquisition carries on, that there is a timely refurbishment as and when needed, because we've got over, I think, 3,000 people on the housing waiting list. So clearly we want to try and get people in as soon as possible, but I think we've heard loud and clear that is being taken into consideration. The main question I had was just whether the portfolio holder could explain the strategies behind the temporary accommodation dilemma that we've got, because we've also, concurrent to this, got the Seascape Homes and Property Limited on, which also acquires homes, and BCP acquires homes on the open market, very similar to this, to essentially help people that find themselves homeless, quite often in B&B. That has a slightly different aim, and the aim of the Seascape strategy is actually to give longer term lets to people of up to a year, so that they can then use their housing benefit, get on the kind of path to stability and permanence, and then move them into a more stable, probably private rented sector environment. And it's been tremendously successful over the years, because rather than just deal with the problem of people being homeless with some immediacy in a very, very temporary way, it sets them onto a more stable path for the future. How does this new investment into TA work alongside Seascape? It's not a one or the other, is it? Or are we still pursuing the Seascape strategy? Because my only caveat would be on the temporary accommodation is it's not necessarily fixing the issue in a slightly longer term. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. So I think currently it is one over the other, because we were in a situation where we had this huge problem and we needed to get it solved. However, we are coming up to the expiration of the 5-year business plan within Seascape, and we are having discussions on whether we want to expand the acquisitions programme in terms of wanting to have this form of accommodation for people coming out of temporary accommodation and having longer term so basically what Seascape was based for, whether we want to start expanding that again. So over the last year or so, it's been a focus on temporary accommodation in order to get people out of B&B into a proper home. Now we are looking potentially at this longer term form of accommodation. The only issue with it is there is minimal turnover, so people do, and because it's almost so successful, people do stay in those homes for a long period of time, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, we are exploring that option, if that's helpful.
Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked the question, because I hadn't quite realised that the whole of essentially the Seascape acquisition strategy had been paused and essentially redirected to this TA strategy. It could be the right decision, but has any analysis gone on into how effective this is? Because, again, just to reiterate, the reason that Seascape was set up in the way that it was that we found, again and again, people were finding themselves homeless, and then we'd sort them out and they were finding themselves homeless again. So it was an effort to, in a slightly more longer term way, get people back on their feet, used to be paying rent on time, so that there wasn't that cycle of homelessness. Are we confident that redirection from a longer term enablement to a short term fix is the right one?
Councillor Wilson.
In the short term, yes, because what we've wanted to do is get the number of families out of B&B accommodation. So yeah, quickly, because that is the worst form of accommodation. I don't know if I got it across well enough in my introduction, but when you cannot cook a meal, when your children doesn't have a place to do their homework, when there's no space to put a Christmas tree, that's not the accommodation we want people in. So in the short term, it's definitely has been the priority, because it got out of control, in all honesty, in terms of our dependence on it. So that's why now we are looking in the longer term. So I think it's a fair challenge, and also just appreciate your congratulations to be with. Thank you.
Before you come back, Councillor Broad, just for clarification, when the temporary accommodation is let out, is it let out under PRS rules or is it let out under an alternative system? What?
It's let out as general temporary accommodation, as all of our accommodation is within the HRA.
As social housing?
Yes.
On a temporary
Yeah,
basis?
affordable. No, on affordable. Yeah.
LHA. Yeah.
Okay, so is the tenancy agreement, is it? A tenancy agreement under private rented sector rules? Who manages it? Seascape?
No.
No?
It's
Under the housing revenue account?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
It sits in its own separate portfolio. It's not managed by Seascape, but it is managed by Anthony Lowe's team under Ben Tomlin.
So what rules do apply to the tenancy that you let? Is it just a short-term tenancy?
Ben Tomlin has his hand up on the screen, so I'll let him articulately explain.
Sorry, Phil, it was a key. It was important to that. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, just for clarification. So any of the occupants of temporary accommodation is provided under the terms of the 1996 Housing Act, and the tenancy type is a non-secured tenancy agreement. So it enables flexibility to end those tenancies more quickly. So it is slightly different from a secured tenancy managed within the housing revenue account.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And you can understand my not concerns, because I completely understand that there was a need to act quickly on this, and it seems like the right thing to do. But there is a real difference between a short hold tenancy agreement, an AST that was happening before, and these kind of what can be ultra short-term temporary accommodations, which sometimes are needed. So I suppose the final question I would ask is, you are operating under a self-imposed envelope at the moment of funding and borrowing. If there is a very clear need for the temporary accommodations, I think of it in my head, TTA, and there's also, as we have recognised, a need for further investment in via Seascape. Would the cabinet member, you don't need, you can do both if you want to. Our borrowing levels are not at the level where we're nearly pushed over the edge, particularly because there's clear business cases for these and they bring in income. So would you advocate doing both in the future rather than just one?
Potentially, I think that's something that we need to assess. I think we need to understand where we are. Our immediate thoughts were on reducing B&B usage. We've got to that stage where we've got it down so significantly, and I can't congratulate the team enough on that when the national trend is rising. So now we're in a position where we can start to think more long term and decide whether that's what we want to do. So yeah, definitely not off the table, but I think we need to really think that through and make sure that it is right for us, and that's key.
Okay, I know you want to come in, Kate, but Mr. Richards, I think, wanted to come in on that point.
Chair, can I just highlight with regards to the issue regards to the council's debt, when we come on to the MTFP paper, there is a graph in there or a table that sets out your debt as an authority relative to other local authorities, and what that shows is that we're in the mid-range compared to other local authorities. If you looked at some of those to the left on the graph, actually those are the local authorities probably that have got themselves into quite severe financial problems because they've taken on more debt than they actually have the capability of servicing going forward. The other thing to highlight when it comes to an acquisition programme, whether that be through Seascape or whether that be through the housing revenue account, the issue of viability always comes into play. And at this moment in time, compared to some points in the past, interest rates are higher than they have been. And that really tests the viability of any financial model with regards to that purchase, even when you take the bed and breakfast savings into account.
Thank you. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, go back a little bit to the business of the the voids and the large number that are acquired but not yet ready for use, and just ask if there's an issue there, what the opinion of the officers and the portfolio holder is. Is there an issue there around the quality of the properties that we're purchasing, and are we purchasing properties that need a lot of work and getting them a better price, but then they're staying empty for longer? And would it be better to look at buying properties that are a bit more ready to go, that would cost us a bit more, but get going more quickly, be usable more quickly? And has there been any work done around, what the savings, how that would stack up, the numbers would stack up? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Salmon. I think we buy them in Nigel's going to come in and correct me when I get this wrong, but I think we buy them in varying conditions. So there have been some, and I know cases where they haven't been quite to the standard, where we certainly can't let them straight away. But then there's been ones that are better quality. Hence the fluctuation, and why it's difficult in terms of really accounting for the voids periods as an average, because there's some that are taking far too long to get into use, and that's bringing the average up significantly, whereas there are some that we're able to get online much quicker. But I'll hand over to Nigel, because he'll probably correct me now.
Councillor Wilson's covered the point well, but it is a mix. We've tried to, there's limited properties available, and we've had an impact on the market because we've bought in volume. So there's limitations of market, there's limitations to location, just because of the difficulties at BCP, and then also the team, Ben's team, are always articulating that we need to be conscious about where those properties are actually acquired. We need to be quite sensitive to the wider community about how we're buying. We're not necessarily clustering homes. So you're balancing off all of those different dynamics then to what is actually physically available. We have bought, to coin a phrase, the do-uppers. There have been some do-uppers winning. We believe that we bought them at a price that will still offer the council good value for money. That's our, if you like, opinion as an officer. That's been backed up by, obviously, Red Book valuations, which are carried out on every single purchase, and then about the financial feasibility that has to be gone through to ensure that each individual purchase is viable on its own as an individual purchase. And then we bought some brand new properties that have been from smaller developers, which have been 3 or 4 together. So it has been a real mixed portfolio. I think we need to be conscious that some of the properties have only very recently completed. So whilst there's a lot that are empty, what we haven't articulated within a single sort of chart, if you like, is that the detail of all of the properties, the date of completion and the date of occupation. So there's been a flow of properties since probably February of last year that have been coming through. The TA properties now have all completed, and there are a few of the Laugh and Chat properties that will then be completed in the early part of next year, ready for occupation by March.
Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Salmon stole half of my question, but I'll ask the remaining bit of it was regarding voids. Again, you mentioned there. Just on regarding benchmarking and reporting of voids, it'd be very useful to see a sort of tracking of how voids have sort of occurred over time, but also as if there's a benchmark with other authorities on voids. Is that something that could be produced?
But definitely would have to take that away. I'm not sure there would be a benchmark with other local authorities, because I'm not sure there's that many local authorities buying in the volume that we are. I don't know, so I need to go away and have a look at that. But I think it's fair to try and pin yourself against other local authorities and do the best you can.
Councillor Tarling, we could take an action, if you like, and put it in there and ask for a response from the portfolio holder about potential benchmarking, if you wish.
Yes, if I could we request...
If you're happy to take an action to just have a look at that.
More than happy to go away and look at it. There might not be anything we can benchmark against.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, more than happy to. Yeah.
Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, first of all, I just wanted to say it's some really good work done here. It's obviously really, really important thing to be getting people out of bed and breakfasts. And very important that we have temporary accommodation that we can move people into. As we have got a statutory duty to be dealing with people who are homeless. So I just really wanted to mention, since Seascape were mentioned, and I think I heard that that's on hold. They're not actually acquiring properties at the moment anyway. So probably the thing that I'm a bit worried about isn't going to happen at the moment anyway. But if you were to consider using Seascape for that again, I just wanted to really just bring up the problem that happens in my ward where Seascape put in an offer, I believe, on a property for vacant possession, and the private landlord then proceeded to evict the tenants and make them homeless. And so, as a result, it was buying a property to house homeless people, but making people homeless in order to do it. Now, I believe this might have been just a one-off, but I really just wanted to be sure that if we basically are really, really sure that we're not doing that, because obviously it is like shooting ourselves in the foot.
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I think that's quite fair. We're definitely not doing that in this instance that you talk about. It was actually quite a difficult situation for myself, as I knew one of the residents within the property. So obviously I had it was really tough. And although we weren't the ones to serve the Section 21, it's difficult for anybody to make that differentiation, and we fully accepted that. So it hadn't happened previously, and it won't happen again. It was a conscious decision that any of the properties that we bought had to be been on the market for a long time at vacant. So going forward, so for a period of time. So I think. Difficult one. That was a tough time. I didn't like that.
Thank you for your reassurance.
Thank you, Councillor Northover.
Yeah, I was just interested in, so we've got temporary accommodation and we're talking about moving people in, but I'm quite interested in when people move out and how quickly we might expect that to happen. And with the new places that we've acquired, have we had any where several people have gone through any of those properties? And also, where do they go afterwards as well?
Cheers, thank you. So there's quite a lot to that question. I'm sure, again, Ben Tomlin will probably come in and correct me. But I can you repeat the question? No. We've had. I'm not sure about the throughput, but when people are going into this form of accommodation, well, I suppose it's worth stating how long people were staying in bed and breakfast as well. They were staying in there far too long. There's a statutory limit of 6 weeks. People were staying in there for months on end, and that's not acceptable. So we've got a similar probably type of length of stay, averaging under a year, I think, in these types of forms of accommodation. So still a long time, but it's much better to be in this type of accommodation for a long period of time than in B&Bs. Again, Ben might come in and correct me, I don't think we've seen any throughput from these ones that have just really come online. Did you have another part to your question? Sorry.
Where do they go next?
So we work with them. It could be within the private sector, it could be within social housing. Who knows in the future, maybe a Seascape Homes property if that's what the route that we decide to go down. But yeah, we try to work with them to get something more permanent.
I'm just going to add a further point. Covers a couple of points councillors have made. The Laugh and Shaps both go into Seascape, and both of those specific schemes are aimed at the longer term stays. So they're specific needs groups that have particular needs, and that's about offering them sort of a year to 2 years to become settled, understand what needs to happen before they're then moving on, as well as having a lot of help and support to prepare them in readiness to move on. So that's still actively within Seascape, and I'm hoping that Ben will come back and support the rest of the question, because he's best placed to follow up for us on that one.
Okay, just a couple. The current acquisition programme, and I think the public aren't generally aware that 68.8 million invested in housing to accommodate people that would otherwise stay in bed and breakfast or be homeless. So it's a huge figure, because people tend to associate homeless with just rough sleeping, but there was a huge effort going across the council services to try to help people that are in genuine need. The question I've got is, this is the most recent acquisition programme. Are there other temporary accommodation properties on top of this, which we don't hear too much about because those programmes started years ago? How many temporary housing accommodations do we actually own?
Sorry. The monitoring officer was offering me another drink. Sorry, the question was how many temporary accommodation?
Yeah, I mean the 111 or the 68 million investment current CNAS investment programme. There have been preceding programmes buying temporary accommodation.
Yeah.
So what is the total portfolio of temporary accommodation now? We're looking at buying another 111 there for the temporary accommodation, but there are some that already exist, and I think those are the ones that are currently let out by Seascape.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the total portfolio for the number of temporary accommodations units that we hold?
I don't have that figure to hand. I don't know if any of the officers do.
I don't have that information to hand, unfortunately, no. We could come back and
it's just rattling around in my subconscious is a huge figure of investment in housing before. Even started as long ago as the Bournemouth Council days, where there was like a £50 million programme, and then there was another programme on top of that. So this one seems to be on top of that. So, I'm trying to get a handle on just how many temporary accommodation units we are letting out to people. And of course the question is, if those units were let years ago, are those people still there? Have they been there all those years? Have they not moved on? Which has then forced the requirement to make another investment. So, because the problem here, of course, is you're not actually creating additional houses, are you? You're just using different houses already owned by other people.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the point I tried to make in my introduction is that this is just, it's a plaster, it's a sticking plaster. We need to be building more new homes and more new affordable homes. Going back to your point around how many, the number of homes we have in temporary accommodation, it's probably, going historically, it'd probably be quite difficult to put a figure on that, because just because they were at one point temporary accommodation doesn't mean that they can't be repurposed for other uses potentially. So I'll have to go back and get that figure for you. But in terms of, for example, the Seascape portfolio that was mentioned, most of them aren't temporary accommodation. That isn't temporary accommodation. That's accommodation where people in temporary accommodation have gone to have something more permanent. So I'm happy to come back on the figures for you in terms of the number of units. But we also have so many different types of temporary accommodation. The self-contained, the shared, the family hostels. So with these programs, it's never, to my mind, a bad thing purchasing these, because they're better forms of accommodation than some of the stuff we already have, and it's improving on that and being able to readjust and repurpose the portfolio that we have.
Yeah, I understood completely. The concept of moving people away into other accommodation that doesn't exist is a problem that's I've always struggled with, and how do you actually achieve that? But Councillor Broadhead wants to come back in, then I'd like just to move on a little bit, because the paper also talks about the purchase of additional units. And before we get onto that, I just say that I felt a bit that the paper is a bit conflated, in that you're talking about strategy, but you're also putting an operational acquisition within that strategy within a single paper. I felt it kind of confused it a bit, because I think the strategy should be standing alone and an acquisition is a separate thing. But nevertheless, we are where we are. Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, just on the point that you're raising around the temporary accommodation side, as somebody that's been on and off the board of Seascape, I can tell you that the the operating model there is that people stay for a year. So the idea is it gets them it's a bit of give and take, but generally those are then free for other people. So it's not just people that are homeless then stuck, and that's part of that model. So I know that has and or hopefully still is the case. I was actually going to talk about the acquisition, but I've got a couple of questions that really, unfortunately, will probably need to be in exempt session. They'll be super quick, but I'll defer to you when the appropriate opportunity is.
Okay, we'll just finish the debate on the paper, then we'll move into exempt session to talk about that. Just whilst we've mentioned it, does the table on page 516 include of the 36 flats for harbour sale? Was that additional to that number?
Before Nigel answers, I'm going to say no because it hasn't been completed on, but yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, good, thanks.
Okay, so we're on top of that. Okay, well that's significant. Yeah. Okay. Any more? In that case, okay, we need to go into closed session now, so I'm afraid that members of the public will have to be.
Yeah,
yes, okay. I have to get your agreement, members, if we can go into closed session. Do I have your agreement that we can go into closed session?
Yep.
Okay. No dissent? Okay, we're going to closed session. Thank you. So members of the public, I'm afraid, will have to leave.
They can come back.
You can come back.
Yeah. Come on.
So,
Yeah. You can come back in afterwards.
Yeah.
I think it's only Vic. It's only one.
Yeah.
Is your microphone on? Now.
Just before we start the debate, we have got new technology here. We have to make sure that we're not live streaming a confidential discussion, and it's one of the first times that we will have had to do that in this room, I think. So I'm just waiting for Claire to come back, who's just attending a member of the public, just to make sure that we're ready to do this and we don't drop a clanger, as they say.
Yeah, let's.
Sure, okay. 5 minutes comfort break, everybody.
Yeah, let's
Thanks.
do that.
let the member of the public come back.
Thank you, Jamie.
Okay, the live stream back on again. And we'll just get the member of public back into the room.
Okay, we're back on.
Okay.
The live stream's back on. If you want to just say Chair.
Okay, the live stream has now definitely kicked in, so we are now live, members. So back in open session, and the member of the public is back with us. I'll just go over what I said just a moment ago, that now it's the time to consider the recommendations that we have in the paper. And I think Councillor Tarling wishes to make a point on one of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the recommendations, there's two parts to it. Firstly, a recommendation to the Council to approve the acquisition of the harbour sale, to approve to proceed with the acquisition and delivery of 16 homes under the HF3 programmes, and then approve the delegation to the COO et al. It then goes on to say it's recommended that the Audit and Governance Committee recommend to the Council. I don't think, just clarification, can the OSB recommend to the Audit and Governance that they make a recommendation? It sounds like too many recommendations.
We can do that.
You can make a recommendation.
We can make a recommendation to who we want, any other committee or cabinet or full council. Yeah, we can do that. Councillor Broadhead.
I think the confusion arises from the fact that although this paper is in our pack, I believe we're actually scrutinising the Cabinet paper. So that's the Cabinet's recommendations, not ours. So it's not for us to do that. It's for us to look at those recommendations which Cabinet are considering.
Yeah.
Can I just move it?
Yes, sure.
So I'd like to move that we recommend to Cabinet that they support all of these recommendations, A, B and C.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, Councillor Wayne. Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, in that case we'll go to the vote. Sorry, Okay, all those in favour of that motion?
That's unanimous.
Unanimous. Okay, members, anything else on this paper that you'd like to discuss? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And
Thank you, Chair.
and
Really
team.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much. Thank you. Good luck. Okay, members, so that brings us on to, what's the agenda number? 9.
Scrutiny of budget related report. Here it is.
Yeah. Scrutiny of budget related cabinet reports, of which there are 3 sections. Sorry? Item
8.
Okay. Item 8, it's just I've got it says 9 on here, but I've obviously got mixed up. We swapped them around here. Okay. Yeah, there are three elements to this, and I think Councillor Cox, are you going to introduce all of them, or? Okay, I know we did agree that we would deal with this as one item, so if you want to make an introduction to all of them now, or you can do them separately if you wish, but how would you prefer to do it?
I'd do it all together. If
All
that's
two together. Okay, all right, please go ahead then.
Might put down some time. Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Essentially, I'll do them in order. So the first one is the medium-term financial plan, and essentially, the medium-term financial plan really aims for the council to continue to maintain a balanced budget for the years coming forward. And if you take your mind back to February 2024, we approved a budget there which was balanced for the 4 years. It did include £38 million worth of savings, efficiencies and extra income. And it fundamentally did address the £30 million underlying deficit which existed in the budgets previously. But like every year that's happened so far, the assumptions need to be revised continually and looked at and make sure that they still exist. And there are obviously, of course, emerging pressures that happen every year. In the assumptions that we did come up with for the budget for 24-25, we did assume 2.99% and 2% for council tax increases, a 2% increase in pay across the board, a 3.9% increase in the living wage, and we did assume that the DFE and MHCLG would find a solution to our cash flow problems in respect of send. As well as this, obviously, we've also had the overview and scrutiny has for the first time been given the time and the resources to inquire into key lines. Those lines being school transport, care growth, demand management, climate change, and B&B costs, as well as this committee is doing car parking and the residence card. Our responses to those suggestions that came out will be made in the February budget papers that come out. But one of the fundamental events which has happened over the last few months, obviously, is the new Labour government's budget. And one of the first key things in that budget was actually the stability rule, which they have promoted. I have to say I smiled somewhat and when they came up with that one, because presumably that doesn't include the fact that they seem to ignore send and they're putting the send deficits completely to one side. That to me does not agree with that stability rule. However, there were a number of items which did affect us in that budget. There was an extra £100 million which has been put aside to social care. I think the total was 600 million, but we had assumed 500 million, and whatever our share of that would be. But obviously the big headline measure was the increase in the national insurance contributions, going from 13.8% to 15%, which in itself was a fairly large burden on lots of local authorities as well as private companies. But the hidden cost of that was actually the reducing of the threshold in which national insurance is payable, virtually halving that threshold. There was also a national living wage increase, which is fantastic for those people who are on it, to 6.7%. But that very measure in itself has actually led to an £11.1 million pressure in our budgets for next year at a stroke. There were other things which might be temporarily a good bit of good news in terms of the extended producer responsibilities. The government have guaranteed what our contribution will be for the next year, which will be a small relief to us. And in terms of the funding gap, after all of these pressures, we're now sitting at 5.6 million, which given all those pressures that have happened and those changes, I think we're probably doing quite well at the moment. So that's really what I wanted to comment on in terms of the medium-term financial plan. In terms of budget monitoring, what I would like to point out is that 95% of the service-based savings that we actually said we would do have been achieved, and it's quite an achievement given the amount of savings that we were putting forward. And 75% of the transformational savings, which is a bit more disappointing, but it's still 75%, and we've still got another 25% to do. I think that averages out at about 88% overall. there are a number of areas which are actually overspending to a worrying degree during the year, and those include the adult care packages, safeguarding and early help. Corporate parenting also is overspending, as well as education and skills. Parking services still is a problem, not from the income side, but from the cost side. Law and governance is actually overspending by the tune of nearly £1 million. And of course, the hidden cost of send is the interest costs that we're having to incur, or the lack of interest that we're getting on our balances because we're having to fund send. And that's leading to increased pressures. So that the pressures in year are huge, but we are demanding from directors that they do manage those budgets and keep them in place, so that we're not adding additional pressures for next year and for the next year's budget. So that was my summary of the budget monitoring. There is another paper in there to do with the cash flow management for the DSG grant, and really it's a very thorough report you've got there, which kind of details what the problem is, how we've got there, and what our options are. And I think those are quite neatly summarised in paragraph 28, which sets out the four. If we don't get any help from the government, what do we do? And those are not to send money to the government, not to send any cash in respect of business rates, to cut send provision, to breach the legislative and accounting framework, and fourthly, to issue a Section 114. As far as I'm concerned, none of the bottom three are acceptable, which basically leaves us not sending money to the government. I'm afraid Councillor Salmon will be disappointed to know that her husband's suggestion of robbing a bank, we've had to discount, but there you are. So none of them are legal. So and that's the position at the moment that the government are leaving us in, is to consider basically four illegal pathways, and none of which we particularly want to take.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cox. Members, Councillor Dedman.
Flashing green. Thank you. Thank you. My operator was not operating properly here. I just wanted to point out, in the interests of being non-political, as this committee is, that it's not only the present government, it's all the governments that have been very, very bad about local government, all the central governments, and I think that not sending money to them would be a jolly good idea. But I mean, I assume that's a frivolous, about as good as Joe's robbing the bank idea. But no, I think all the governments throughout all the years that I've been in local government, and that's quite a long time now, I think we've been terribly let down by central government, and this is the culmination of what's been going on. And congratulations for still carrying on.
Okay.
Can I just say, it's not necessarily frivolous because it's in that paper. So it's not that frivolous. It is an option. It's not one we want to take, though.
Just as we go through the debate, just be mindful of the recommendations in each section of paper, and if anybody wants to support those in there, we should say so. Or otherwise, or if you've got something different to say or recommend, any other members wish to? Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. And just a couple of questions. On the MTFP paper, I notice it's on page 364, paragraph 13, there's a reference to a local government finance policy statement that is coming in November, but it's December now. And apologies if I've missed some news that I should have picked up on, but could I just ask whether we've had that and what it said? And the other question was about the on the budget monitoring paper.
Yeah, the question was about the parking costs, as you referred to, that with still a huge amount of additional costs being incurred. I think it's bank charges from memory, and it was in the last of these monitoring reports. And I just wanted to find out, is that still an ongoing situation that we're trying to resolve and get that money back, or is that just money that is lost at this point? Do we have an answer?
Councillor Sabby, could you just remind me of the paragraph of the first question you made?
Page 364, paragraph 13.
364.
Am I telling you the wrong thing?
Yeah, no, you're right.
No.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Mr. Richards?
Chairman, just for the tape, my name's Adam Richards. I'm the Council's Director of Finance. So you're right. We did outline the fact that we expected what is referred to as a local government finance policy statement. This is traditionally set up to be delivered in November. I think in the last 2 years it's been delivered in December, but we were quite surprised that actually we got that announcement in November. So we have now received that announcement, and what happens is the government set out its intentions when it comes to the local government financial settlement. It doesn't give us the detail, so it's just a lot of headlines really. But in that they confirmed that the council tax referendum principles will be 2.99% basic and 2% social care precepts for unitary councils. So that was in line with the December MTFB update assumption. They confirmed support for national insurance increase, because remember we previously highlighted the fact that as an employer we will pay that national insurance increase. And I think the figure we quoted was probably in excess of £5 million for the council as an employer. But what we were assuming is that, based on early indications, that actually we'd get some kind of compensation from the government from having to pay that. And they confirmed in that they will support us with directly employed staff. What that means is that there's no compensation in there directly for any commission care costs that might go up as a consequence of the care provider having to increase their charges to the local authority. But good news in the sense that at least there's some confirmation that they will support us. Whether that compensation meets our cost, we need the detail to come, as to exactly how it will work. What they confirmed when it came to SEND is that at the moment there's that statutory override that finishes on the 31st of March 2026. And what they confirmed is that they will set out plans in regards to the statutory override in the provisional local government settlement that we get in December. So that's good, because hopefully there's then something coming that actually will address the statutory override issue, and hopefully more bespoke for this council deal with the cash flow issue. With regards to the flexible use of capital receipts, which is a mechanism we're using to fund our transformation programme, what they confirmed there was actually at the moment there's a restriction if you have redundancy costs as to what redundancy costs could be funded by the flexible use of capital receipts. And what they've done is just tweak the edges of that to say you can fund all the redundancy costs, not just the statutory elements of those redundancy costs. And in that document, what they also did is they confirmed support next year by way of the Household Support Fund, which I know a huge number of our community will be looking for that reassurance, and they gave reassurance in that document. And again, exactly what amount and all that sort of stuff will come hopefully in that provisional local government settlement, which we are expecting either on the 16th or the 19th of December, depending on who you listen to.
Can I just add, actually, that assumption of the recompense for the NIC has actually already been assumed in our, so it has been assumed already.
You okay?
The other question was about the. Are we going to get any of that overspend on the parking back, or is it just lost? Because it was in the last quarterly monitoring that it was a problem, and I thought what we were told then was we're trying to sort that out.
I think the problem is it's not the cost, it's you just don't have the money. We haven't earned any money. Mr. Richards.
Yeah, I can take that. I think we were, in the last update, hopeful of a pleasant summer. We didn't get a pleasant summer, which has further hit our income targets, which has increased the pressure on the overspend there. We are looking at what actions we can take in terms of the charges. I have the team working hard on that. We have some ideas and they'll come through the relevant committees soon.
Okay, Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about the in the last report where it talks about what will we do if we don't have enough the cash flow. Now, I'm still one of the things that I see you haven't got in your recommendations that I think it would be a good idea to have, if you think there is a danger that the government won't come up with anything, is perhaps to work more with the 5 MPs, if you're not doing that already, to make sure they're sort of getting government to listen to you. But if the worst happens and the government don't bail us out at the last minute and we're running out of cash, there's these 4 options, A, B, C and D, all of which seem quite horrendous. And I wanted to ask the financial officer, really, are any of these, I mean, the cabinet member said only A is a possibility. Is that actually a possibility? Can we do that, given that it's illegal? So are these actual real possibilities of things we can do, or are they just things that wishful thinking? Yes.
Could you also confirm that you've actually set this out to government, Mr. Richards, these ideas? Thank you.
So yes, those ideas have been set out, and what you'll find attached to this report is all the correspondence with government, and that includes correspondence with the government from 4 of the local 5 MPs who are on board with this issue, have been supporting the council with this issue and taking up the cause as part of that process. I think a member of this committee tried to get the 5th to join, to be fair to him, but I think the 5th member wasn't particularly, the 5th local MP wasn't particularly interested in taking up that cause, if I understand the dialogue correctly, of course. With regards to those 4 options and whether or not they are acceptable, I think what the report says, all of them are unpalatable. All of them will involve breach of legislation and statutory regulations, which we as officers, or certainly myself as an officer, would struggle to recommend to you. So, it is something that we watch this space. We are hopeful, from the conversations that have been taking place, that in that provisional local government finance settlement, it will include something on how they are going to give me the advice I need to be able to advise you how to set a legally balanced budget for next year. Because at this moment in time, I can't do it. There are 4 options, and all 4 of them are totally unpalatable.
And at least if the government can't bail us out, at least they could tell us what they want us to do instead.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Chief Exec wanted to come in. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so just to clarify the position of the 5th MP in that position, actually he wanted to deal with it in a different way. Was happy to take it up, but not through letter, but wanted to take it up through parliamentary question. I think.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to backtrack to something that was previously said regarding recompense for the extra cost in social care and so on from the budget changes. When there was a similar issue in the to do with the police panel, where they were going to recompense for the cost, the pay rise for police officers, what they did is they converted it into the funding formula, which meant that Dorset's funding formula was a lot less than the national average, and they lost, I think it's about £2 million on that deal. And how are we on the gradual, on the sort of the global thing, because I know Dorset was close to the bottom, so they got hit quite hard by that. Are we closer to the average, or will we stand to lose that sort of amount of money?
The budget included quite substantial amounts of money, and it was specifically targeted to those areas with deprivation. And when you look at, when certainly the government looks at BCP, they don't see deprivation. And therefore we are not going to fare very well on that basis.
So there's going to be a gap between what they've covered and what we actually get.
You could say that, I couldn't possibly comment.
Sorry, we're having a bit of technical trouble here. Sorry, Mr. Richards.
Maybe if I could just add a little bit of a footnote to that, in the sense that, you know, what we've seen through the announcements so far is, as the portfolio holder said, is that this government are particularly keen on deprivation as indices as to how they allocate their resources. But as he also highlighted, they also take account of local resource. You know, and in local resource, they tend to consider how much we generate by council tax and how much we generate by business rates. You know, and for me, as your finance officer, you know, that worries me, because actually it sends out some signals, you know, potentially coming down the road of us that we're not particularly aware of at this stage, that there may be some significant adjustments as they move more of the funding onto that kind of basis. But that is just conjecture at this stage. I would hope if they did take those steps, they'd look at things like, you know, protections and giving period time to adjust. But it is a potential, you know, risk coming down the road at us for future years.
Can I just hold the meeting just for a couple of seconds whilst I try to get some power to my laptop?
The power plug's working. Your cable's not working. It's not the power plug. I tried the same one as I was using.
Is yours working?
Yeah, mine's working fine.
Oh, okay.
It's not this one. It's the cable.
I may be wrong, agreed by the government, sounds from that article that you suggest that they might be considering something similar for 25, 26, and clearly it would be government discretion as to whether or not they would allow them that permission.
So Councillor Cox gave us 4 options there. This potentially could be a 5th option, or is that something that we don't wish to consider because it is heading us down the route to a Section 114 notice?
I think we'd need to wait for the government to advise us as to what comes out of the provisional local government finance settlement, because at that stage, I think, you know, all bets are off, and, you know, they may even suggest it, but who knows? I think we just got to wait and see what they say as part of that provisional settlement.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Broadhead. I'm sorry, just before Chief Executive wanted to come in.
Oh, just briefly about council tax limits. So the government sets a cap on council tax limits, which have been expressed so far as likely to be 3% and 2%, 1.99 for social care, so a total of 5% effectively, 4.99%. All councils have a choice of going for a local referendum if you wish to exceed that. So you always have that choice as a council. You have had that choice since about 2010 or 12 or so. I don't think any council in the country has yet exercised that choice and held a referendum and won it, have they? I know they moved towards a referendum. I don't think they did. It pass? I don't know. Anyway, so it hasn't exactly had wide take up because it's quite a dangerous process. We're therefore working the budget within the council tax limits. The challenge for us here is that, of course, council tax should not be used to fund the SEND expenditure. So actually, council tax is not the answer, nor is the HRA, because of course you can't use that, and that's why we've effectively come up with a series of options, none of which are palatable, because they all breach some form of regulation or statutory guidance, which is what we've said to government. You have to provide us with a solution to this. You have set the policy that requires us to provide these services. You have provided the budget for those services, and there's a £40 million a year gap between the two. We have to have a solution, because you can't fund it for council tax, can't fund it from HRA. You know, we no longer have the cash to keep funding it. We need a solution, and that's effectively the challenge we're trying to put to government. We have heard words like there might be some special arrangements in the December the 19th local government provisional financial settlement that will help those councils that have particular difficulties. We don't know if that includes us or not, because of course they won't tell us anything until they make the announcement, but we need to keep the pressure on government, and we are. One of the senior civil servants, I did say, is there anybody else we should speak to? He said, no, Graham, you've raised it with enough people. We all know about it. It's being dealt with at Director General level across DFE, MHCLG and Treasury, and therefore we're assuming that ministers are aware. We don't have an easy answer. I think that's the challenge, isn't it? So the options that you're putting forward actually might all be options to raise cash, but again, they wouldn't really comply with the rules to funding this.
I think it's worth adding. Thank you. It would be worth adding. It would be astonishing if we weren't on that list for help, because we were the first ones to raise this, and we've been at the vanguard basically of keep going on at government. So I would be astonished if we were not on the list. And the fact that they have mentioned it gives me some hope anyway.
Okay, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some slightly more challenging questions, I suppose, later on about budget monitoring. But while we're talking about dedicated schools grant, I just wanted to add a little bit on this. I mean, the figures that we're now getting to are absolutely eye-watering, and all the members of this most recent season of the council and all others, we've spent unholy amounts of time talking about this, and it is really concerning that once again government, and I use the term government because it is of all different colours, is not dealing with this in the urgency that it clearly needs to, particularly when we're now in the position with this cash flow issue. So I completely understand it and get it. I am a little bit, I'm very uncomfortable with us having to essentially, if we get to the stage of it being completely undeniable, having to make decisions as elected officials that breaks the law. So it strikes me that the only option we would have at that time is to agree to a 114. But like others, we hope that enough people have been nobbled on this issue that the severity of it is loud and clear. And on that, in the recommendations that go to Cabinet in tomorrow's Cabinet meeting, there is recommendation C, that the leader once again writes to the Deputy Prime Minister, which she and previous leaders have done on countless occasions. And the offer I would make as Leader of the Opposition, I'm quite happy to co-sign that letter if the administration thought it was useful, to underline that this is pan-political and that this is now a very severe issue that needs the attention right at the very top, and and carries that weight. But happy to make that offer if that helps, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I say I'm not speaking for the leader, but I would welcome that if that was possible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any of the other members? All right. Okay, in that case, I'm going to just on the send. I have real difficulty understanding how we cash flow this. We're not allowed to borrow money to cash flow it. So are we just taking any money we happen to have in our accounts and using that? even money that we have available for capital? Is that we're using any money that we've got basically to cash flow this?
Yeah, you're right, Chair. Anything that's in our accounts, any cash, principally in the form of, reserves because they're cash backed. Anything on a balance sheet that is cash backed, i.e. things like provisions, that's giving you cash, within your treasury management flexibilities to actually cover these payments. And the result of it, because your borrowing is capped at a level, you're just going to run out of that cash headroom.
Okay, so the real cost in this is the loss of the interest on the money that we would otherwise have had in the bank.
Absolutely.
And that's £5.25 million. Wouldn't it be nice to get that money back?
Can I just add that there is it also includes cash that you wouldn't believe, which should be included in that, and that's, for instance, sale money. Sale money is included in that, and when I found that out, I was horrified. But it includes that.
But the people that paid the money would be as well.
Yes, exactly.
What's his name? Okay, just change the subject then completely. I've got a few questions I'd like to ask if you don't mind. And it's about the transformation programme. In the MTFP, it talks about funding the transformation programme. My understanding is the transformation programme is closing and the closure report comes out in January. So we're obviously making provision for a further transformation programme. You'd like to tell us a bit more about that?
I think, clearly there's going to be a report in January with regards to the closure of the transformation programme, which you referred to. But we've got to recognise, we've got several transformation programmes as an authority. We've got the main one, but you've got specific programmes in children's and adults as well, which will be running for a few years still to come. With regards to close down of the main programme, there will still be some residual elements that will then, potentially slip into 25, 26 at least, as part of that closure process. So, all of that will be outlined in that report to Cabinet in January.
Okay, thank you. I do recall that children's and adults transformation programmes were added at some stage to the current programme, so okay, that gives a bit more clarification. I'd just like to go to page 372, which talks about Carter's Quay. I was amazed, actually, given that we've paid for the land, that we now may have to pay a release fee to the administrator. So, I find it unbelievable we have to pay some. Have you got any idea of what sort of level of cost that's going to be? And also, do we know how much the interest on the borrowing of 15.3 that we've already paid is accrued, or we've paid out to date? Because that again is going to be a considerable amount of, and that's funded by revenue, I presume. So together there's a lot of cost going out there, and it's not really going on anything. Mr. Richards.
Chair, there's a lot of detailed questions there with regard, which I'm not at the facility to respond to in the here and the now. But certainly I could take some of those questions away and ask the relevant officers to respond to. Clearly, for the purposes of this report, I highlighted it as a risk, and as you quite rightly point out, I continue to highlight it as a risk because we've made this payment of £15.3 million. We're still incurring some potential costs associated with that property, including that potential release fee, and then there's the interest associated with that. So for me, it's there is that ultimate risk, and I'm trying to encourage a resolution so that anxiety around those payments actually can be reduced.
I don't think you've reduced my anxiety on it, Mr. Richards. But okay. In fact, I've got probably a whole bunch of detailed questions which I probably shouldn't be putting to you at short notice like that. So, Let me just see if there's anything. Yeah, the contingency, the revenue contingency is now all gone. What happens if we get something nasty happens for the rest of the financial year? Where are we going to get the money from?
Chair, you're right in the sense that what we traditionally have done. So if you look back at this time last year, the contingency that we assumed at the budget we release in Q2. So that actually what we don't find is then at the end of the year we've been telling you one story and then suddenly we release all the contingencies and it puts it in a completely different light. What we're trying to do is give you a realistic estimate and forecast of that outturn. What the financial outturn indicated even after the release of those contingencies is that we've got a forecast £3 million pressure. Certainly portfolio holders working with corporate directors, service directors and budget holders are very focused on taking steps and mitigation actions to bring that in line with the original budget, i.e. to break even at zero, because the MTFP that the Councillor Cox referred to at the beginning doesn't make any provision for that £3 million potential overspend. So it's really imperative that everybody works together to reduce it and get it back down to a balanced position. But, as I said, what we're trying not to do is force the organisation to do one thing and then say, oh yeah, and there's all these contingencies we didn't apply. Apply them now so we know the size of the challenge, and the challenge is £3 million.
Okay, thanks. Just a quick word about capital 12. And we're talking about provision of additional education schemes where there's 12.3 million of previously unapproved educational schemes now added to the capital programme. I'm assuming that all these additional capital programmes that since the last budget have been approved through council or cabinet or whatever.
Yeah, and without looking at the exact page reference, we're doing a lot of work around capital to try and
page 383, paragraph 25.
383. We're doing a lot of work around the capital programme, basically to tidy it up, to get it into a more consistent basis with regards to the way we present revenue. And I think, as you mentioned at the beginning of tonight's meeting, the intention is for Q3 we bring something much more transparent to you to show you that position, and that's what we aim to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm glad you brought up the in-year situation, because I know we've all had a bit of a love-in earlier on about the challenge to be faced, but we are here to scrutinise the budget and what's going on with the in-year position as well. And look, I know the Councillor Cox is always at odds to point out the financial sustainability and performance of the last administration. And I'll be the first to admit that there were serious issues, not least when the government changed their mind on the previous leader's securitisation plan, and that was really unfortunate. But in the end, it got resolved. There was no financial support from government needed, and at the end of the last financial year we're in charge, the council's reserves were almost identical to when BCP was formed, and we didn't just balance the books, but had almost a £20 million underspend. Since then, this year's budget was balanced by way of a £25 million one-off use of business rates resource, and that huge contingency. And as you pointed out, Chairman, that huge contingency has been used in full. I appreciate Councillor Cox's positiveness about the savings, but the papers do say only 88% of the proposed savings are on track to be realised. And what it also says in these papers is that if there's a new one-off use of the business rates resource is proposed to balance the books this year, and reserves are now projected to fall. So I suppose my real question is, in that context, Councillor Cox, those in-year savings are really important. How confident are you that you can get back on track, and what confidence do you have about a future planned savings that are in the bigger MTFP that they can be delivered?
How confident am I? That's a good question. I'm reasonably confident. I'm not saying I'm very confident. I think people are working very hard to achieve those savings. I don't think they're going to be achieved in the time scale in which we were hoping they would be achieved, and that's why many of them will be they will be achieving later than expected. But yes, I'm reasonably assured that they will be achieved. I'd just like to come back to you on the securitisation. I don't think that was ever agreed by government, actually. I think that was a figment of somebody's imagination. But that's just a matter of opinion.
Anybody else, members? Okay, I'll just have one more, if you don't mind. On page 422, paragraph 2, there's a comment there that says that the SEND leaders do not have the right powers to respond to issues or improve support. In other words, there's some problems there they don't have the wherewithal to be able to fix. Even if they knew what it was, they don't have the statutory right or powers to deal with it. And given the situation that we're in with SEND, what do they need in order to help them fix it? That's the question, really. Yeah, page 422 on paragraph 2, and it talks about the national context. And towards the end of that paragraph it says, meanwhile, there are critical issues within the statutory framework, including a fundamental misalignment of roles, responsibilities and accountabilities, which means that local SEND system leaders do not have the right powers to respond to issues to improve support. It is a national issue, but I'm assuming that we understand what they're saying here. You're not specialists in the actual administration of SEND, so I can understand it. You can't, but I felt that was quite an interesting statement, because it suggests that we do know what we need to be able to do, but we haven't got the wherewithal to deal with it. And I don't think we're talking just about financial issues. I think the way that SEND is actually managed, because let's face it, we see all the evidence is that SEND system is out of control, isn't it? It's escalating exponentially in terms of its costs. The numbers of cases are going through the roof, and there must be some kind of explanation for this, and I can't seem to see one. But I think Chief Exec wants to come in. Yeah.
I was only going to comment. I think Councillor Burton's online as well, if he wants to come in. But I think what the national report was trying to describe there is a system in which demand is created, not by those that have to fund it. The bit mismatch we've got between schools exclusions and no provision being available. The competition there is for places between local authorities. And the lack of provision in the areas in which it's needed. And actually the entire system is, in a sense, it's broken in the sense that you don't look at what budget's available to provide the service and then provide the service. You have a set of statutory responsibilities that define the service. You have a budget that's disconnected from that. You have players involved that aren't connected to the budget. So, for example, schools make decisions which lead to a consequence that we have to provide a service out of a budget that they don't control. So there's none of the normal controls and links between service provider, budget and responsibility. And I think that's what it was trying to describe there, is that the system comprised a number of moving parts, many of which don't seem to connect. But I say Councillor Burton, I think, has made himself visible, as he may wish to add to that.
Good evening, Councillor Burton. Do you want to come in on this?
Good evening, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I would say very much similar things to what the Chief Exec has just said. The SEND system is, of course, the national legislation that tells us what we have to do and gives the amount of money to us to do that. But of course, the amount of money that we're given isn't enough to do that. It's a complex system in that we have to work with other partners, schools and education, the health service. We seem to have the responsibility, and it's our debt that seems to be building up. We've also, of course, in BCP, we are in an improving system. My focus is actually making the SEND system better for our children and young people within BCP, which also adds attention to the system. So we have so many demands and a lot of the demands are beyond our control.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, yes, completely agree that what this is saying is that the SEND system is nationally broken and needs a bit of an overhaul. But I really wanted to point out the interesting point that where it says that some of the problem is driven by declining inclusivity in mainstream education, and just to point out the fact that when we had our budget working groups, the children's budget working groups did make some suggestions about encouraging inclusivity in mainstream education. So we are making some attempts ourselves locally to do something about the situation already, which is good.
Okay. Anybody else, members?
Can I just add to what Councillor Aikenhead said, is that from conversations that I've had with government advisors, is that they are focused on explaining to schools that they have to do that. They have to be more inclusive, and from a conversation I had today with Councillor Burton, it sounds like that message might be getting through. So you never know.
Okay, I think we've come to the end. So I heard on the news the other day that there was some suggestion that 100% of business rates may be retained by local authorities. Had you heard that? Is that part of this fix?
Chair, I think within the MTFP update report, I think somewhere in either in this report or the previous one, we highlight the fact that the government are committed to further funding reforms, and as part of those funding reforms, then there is potential to discuss a potentially bigger share of retained business rates than the current percentage that we get. However, as I alluded to earlier, they're also looking at future models for redistributing that totality of funding, and as part of that process, then I will certainly be keeping a webbed eye on those funding reforms, because I fear that when they move to a system which is needs based, and if they move to a system that is needs based and takes account of local resources, they take account of in that local resources what we generate in business rates and what we generate by way of council tax income, and in that scenario we can be probably assured that we would receive a total level of resources less than we currently do, and that's something that we just need to be mindful of. But certainly I think we indicated that within the actual funding that they've given out or proposing to give out, they're introducing a new grant, a new £600 million recovery grant. The early indications are that we will see absolutely nothing under that grant, because it is deprivation based. It is based on council tax and other local forms of taxation, what you can raise locally, and therefore I'd be very surprised if we received a penny under that grant when they announce it either on the 16th or the 19th of December.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Councillor Burton has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Burton, have you got a new hand up?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the moment has slightly passed. I was going to follow on from what Councillor Cox said, if you'd like me to.
Yeah, sure. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that he's totally right, and in fact, Councillor Aiken is also totally right. Partnership working is one of the solutions here, and a lot of work is being done in BCP around that. One other thing I would say, following on from what was discussed earlier on, that if we do find a solution in BCP, I know that there's an awful lot of other local authorities who are looking towards us right now and might even be looking at this meeting to see what we're going to do, because they have the same sort of issues and they are rather hoping that we might suggest some solutions to help them out as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, so members, we've come to the end of that debate, I think. Being mindful of the recommendations, and rather than actually maybe necessarily move to support all of them, maybe I could just ask if you have your general agreement of support so I can pass that on to the Cabinet, but unless there's any dissent, in which case I'm also willing to pass that on as well. But, I'd just like to give a flavour of what the debate was and what we think about the various recommendations in the paper. So if you're content with that approach and you are content generally with the recommendations, then we can move on. Everybody seems to be nodding in agreement. Yes. Phil's squinting a bit, but I think I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of that one. So we now move on to BCP libraries, and I was asked to keep it going until you got here. I hope we managed to satisfy you, Councillor Martin, who's going to now come and introduce the paper.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
I really wish I'd been able to deliver this before the last item, but I'll try to be as upbeat as possible as I was going to be. I'm very, very pleased to be able to introduce this report, the next important stage in the development of our library strategy, the first library strategy in the life of BCP, and a lot has obviously happened in those 5 years, or 5.5 years, or 6 years nearly now. Not least the pandemic and the cost of living crisis and all the social and economic challenges that have been brought by these two and continue to bring. Which you might think, why am I mentioning that? Well, because libraries have played a key part in getting us through those. Before I carry on with the detail of the report, can I just thank Linda Anderson, who is our Head of Customer and Libraries, who is on the call, for her work in putting this together, particularly the detailed analysis, and my grateful thanks also to Lisa Stutchbury and her team for the work on the consultation. I'd also like to thank colleagues from all political groups, every single one actually, for engaging with me in the past few months, either in person or by producing a report, so we can gain a big picture on what we think collectively about libraries. And if you'll forgive the pun, I think we are all pretty much on the same page about where we see our libraries. I think there's a real consensus around how important our libraries are to our communities and how much of a vital role they must continue to play. Just a little bit of context. Public libraries have been under huge strain in recent years as local authorities have seen their funding increasingly squeezed. And an independent review of libraries in England, conducted by Baroness Sanderson and published in January of 2024, actually that should be 2024, under the previous government, found a lack of recognition across government and a lack of awareness among the general public of what libraries have to offer. And I think we can all understand why that was the finding. So as far as the report is concerned, a few key points. The consultation has been comprehensive, giving adults, children and users of the home library service the opportunity to give their views. The consultation also reached out to non-users of library services or those who might typically not choose to respond to the survey, and this was through a doorstep knock and drop survey of households across all wards with quotas to ensure representation across age and sex. The report tells us who uses our libraries, how they are used, why they visit, as well as what they think of the service. Satisfaction is high with the service, but our residents also give us some insights as to how we might improve it and develop it. Looking at the views of residents and political colleagues, libraries are valued as places which act as social hubs, where a wide range of resources can be accessed for all age ranges. They act as a valuable educational resource and are pivotal for families of young children. But actually they're a lot more than just that, aren't they? The concept of community hubs from a resident's perspective is more about a place where people can access resources and information, study, attend events and activities, socialise and engage with others, than just about accessing council services. And this whole piece of work around libraries is obviously inextricably tied up with, linked to the issue of community hubs. Alongside the consultation and analysis of outcomes, a needs analysis has been produced to cover the BCP area, and this will enable us to undertake robust decision making around options as we progress thinking about the future library model, and will inform equality impact assessments. So the next step for the team is to pull data around our library buildings using feedback from the consultation and the information we hold to present options around how we might model the service going forward. There's obviously still quite a great deal of work to be done in the next phase, and the intention is to return to Cabinet in May 2025, so 6 months, 5 months, with potential options around on a site-by-site basis. And after that, further consultations will be required, because from a statutory point of view. So to sum up, libraries are places and spaces of warmth, welcome, safety, learning, culture, health and well-being, study, of community growth and development, friendship, of advice, help and information, and of creative health and mental health. I could go on, of course. From here, we need to go into a strategy that meets the needs of our communities and recognises that libraries are both the front line and the last line of defence for many in our communities. And we must develop a strategy to transform libraries into cultural and skills hubs and engines of growth, and I mean growth in a wide variety of ways at the heart of our communities. Now, the public consultation and the contributions from all our political colleagues around the council chamber gives us a good start. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to take questions. Obviously, Linda's here and Matty too.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Martin.
Detail. Thank you.
Okay, members. Councillor Northover.
I just wanted to say, like, what a really amazing report it is, because it's just got everything I think that we need to understand what's happening with the service. So I just wanted to get in there and say, really appreciate that. Thank you.
If I just to point out, although Councillor Northover was looking at me, obviously this is Linda and Lisa's work, but primarily Linda's work. So.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dedman.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a query on the body of the report, which is so detailed and brilliant. So I don't know if it's 30. It is 30. It's on page 456. Anyway, the piece I was interested in was less than half of respondents were satisfied with the ability to access refreshments, which intrigued me, because do you go to the library and think you might have a cup of coffee? And then I noticed later down in the suggestions, perhaps we could consider serving coffee. So is that sort of does one thing generate the other? That people have said, well, I would have liked a cup of coffee. Is that what they're saying in that particular response?
I'm not entirely sure, but I mean I know, for example, that at least one library had a cafe and had facilities for coffee and tea. I suppose it's probably relates to the fact that when people go to the library for all sorts of different reasons. Sometimes just for warmth, sometimes just for company, and I think they would probably wish that was part of the offer. But I mean, it isn't. But I can quite see why people would think that would be a good thing.
Okay. Councillor Broadhead.
I forget my
How
own
could I
name
forget-
most of
how
the time,
could I
Chair. It's
possibly
absolutely no
forget
problem.
that?
It's
Sorry.
not like it's late at night or anything. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just two comments from me. But first of all, like the others, a really good piece of work. I think we're actually very blessed in this council to have a really, really good consultation team. Not undermining your work, Councillor Martin, because it's but this is another good example of really good consultation. Got to make sure we follow through on it, clearly, but that's what that next stage is about. And the good thing about doing that consultation is that you can get under the bones of some of the issues that you might not have noticed before. And one in particular that jumps out at me, and I don't know the details, so I don't know if it's a huge cost, but like every local authority, we're under cost pressures. It's pretty clear from the consultation that the Cabinet member has done that these library services are vital to pretty much everyone, a well-loved service, but there's always room for change, isn't there? And this seems very anti-2024 in terms of where we are in the world, but it struck me in the consultation that 96% of respondents don't use the online library resources that we've got at all. And I can kind of understand that because there are so many other ways to access the kind of resource that you might get via the library. And I noticed that within this, we actually contract this service out. So, my takeaway from that is that do we really need to be paying for the library to provide online services that people aren't using? Probably because they can get it elsewhere. So that's one thing that, it just struck me in the report that I think we might consider as part of the future of the service. And then the only other thing to point out is I thought it was a really helpful part of the consultation to ask people what local libraries they actually use rather than ones that they just generally value. There's some really interesting intricacies in there, particularly around Westbourne. So in Camphor Cliffs, the most used library was Westbourne, not Camphor Cliffs. And in Westbourne, the most used library was Bournemouth, not Westbourne. So I don't know what's going on over there. But I think, again, that is useful if you're looking at the resources and where people access them to have that information as well, which I'm sure will form part of the process. But no, stellar piece of work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sandra McCrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I know which library you're referring to. So the facilities are there regarding a cafe, but obviously when we've been for our councillor surgeries, we get made a cup of coffee, but I don't see anybody else having the benefit of it as well. So it's a shame. Is that down to person power? I mean, could a community group, because you've got the community fridge there as well, that would be a good drawing.
You're talking about Rossmore? Yeah, well, I'm sure that's something we will...
I just wanted to ask very quickly, given some of the statistics I've seen in here, the areas of most deprivation are the ones that libraries are being used the most. So in the future, is it planned to allocate more resources to these libraries, or in order to keep up with use? So for example, Parkstone, which is my patch, the library's not used very much, but then it's very small. So I just wondered, with the idea of with areas of deprivation, whether we will allocate more resources to those areas.
Could I ask Linda to come in on that one?
Please do, yeah.
Linda?
Hello. I think deprivation is one part of it. I think the space within buildings is another. I think that what the art of the next piece of work is drilling down to the next level of detail in the research that we've got. So we've got good data which we've presented at a top overall level. We now need to look at how we can model the service to be affordable and sustainable. And through that, we need to look at the cost of running the service, how we're running it now, how we might run it differently in the future. We need to look at, exactly as you've just said, why are the people in that ward going to a different ward to access the library service, what are the habits of the people that are using, and we've got some interesting data about where people are going to use their library and what their first and second choice library would be, and we can use that data to try and understand how to cluster or group libraries and what that offer should be, and whether there should be differences in offer across different levels of library, if you like. So we currently have bands, but do we have them in the right bands for all the research that we've just undertaken? So I think we need to answer all of those questions. There is, to answer the coffee point, it is a clear indication coming through, and there will be a little bit of disgruntlement from some people that filled in the survey, because we did just shut a couple of cafes before to make the savings we needed to make, but we needed to shut them because they weren't covering the costs. But there might be other ways in which we can deliver those, other ways in which we can get coffees and teas and snacks and things into libraries, which we can do more affordably, or through third parties and partners or volunteers, or any number of things. So the next bit of work is really about digging into all of that and coming back with those options as to how we can deliver the service that our residents are telling us they want.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aikenhead. Councillor Canavan, I'll go round the panel first, then I'll come to you when they've finished. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh yeah, thank you very much for this. It's good to see all the results of the survey out like this, and interesting to hear about people wanting more cafes, things like that. And I think what I'm looking at this, what I'm reading into it, is perhaps there is quite an agreement that although people do still go to libraries for books, they do quite like the idea of combining that with going to your library for other reasons. And I think that because we're now in a world where a lot of things are online, it's nice to have something like a library being something that is face to face. Now, there's one thing that's not mentioned in here that I think that I would like to be taken into account when you do the strategy, or maybe even before that, because I think that officers are already talking about it. I had some requests from people as to would it be possible to set up a Friends of the Library organisation for Poole. And I found out that there's already one in Camford Cliffs Library. And I went along to the one in Camford Cliffs to see what they did, and they have coffee mornings there. And there's a few of the other libraries have got them already. So I think that is something that, because we didn't ask about it in the survey, people might not have mentioned it. But I think that if it's something that we gave people the opportunity to do, it's an opportunity maybe to have more events, definitely to get the community more involved in the library. And yes, so things like having a cafe, having a coffee morning, having groups doing things there, fits in quite well with the idea of giving people an opportunity to become a friend of the library and have an organisation where they can get together and have a say about how things are happening on a regular basis, not just through a one-off survey. So I hope that can be taken into account.
Councillor Martin?
Just come back on that, just to say that I've visited 19 out of our 24 libraries, some for meetings, some to chat with people, and some just as a mystery shopper, if you like, and actually some to do some work from with the council laptop. And the very first one I went to in that round of having a look was Camford Heath with Sandra Moore, and they obviously I found out about what an amazing friends group they have there. So I think I'm right in saying this. I know Councillor Moore is on the call, and I think she has. I'm pretty sure she agreed to sort of advise or help anybody who wanted to set up a friends group. So I think some of that work is already underway. I know there's some work going on in possibly Springbourne as well. So you make a really valid point. and that is being recognised as actually a really good way to get the community engaged. I think Linda might want to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's work that's currently underway. We do have friends groups. We have 4 or 5 of them across different libraries. They all operate differently. We inherited a lot of them from the legacy authorities. What we've done at the minute is we've put together a framework so that we can actually invest in and give some guidance to groups that might want to set themselves up as friends groups. And we're just at the stage of passing that through legal at the moment, so that we can then come out to our existing friends groups and bring them in to kind of advise us as we go. But the end game is to try and encourage friends groups for our libraries, because, as you say, they bring extra capacity, fundraising, and all the rest of it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Trent?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Regards the Rossmore Library, that was actually purpose-built with a cafe area in it, but when the library hours were cut, that side of the offer was cut as well. And, I can understand that from the point of view, you probably need someone that will go and sort of make a cup of coffee for a customer. But going back to another issue that cropped up there was that, and I had this conversation, it's possibly a good year plus ago, that that particular library contained quite a few small rooms, and it turned out that they weren't being utilised because they were reserved for BCP training purposes, but not used very often. And, I wonder whether there is the possibility of sort of maybe promoting availability of rooms to community groups and so on who want to do a little bit there, because although every time we do a surgery there's something else going on upstairs, but more often than not there's not enough going on. So, I wonder whether we can promote the availability of rooms within these libraries to community groups so that we make the best use of them.
Councillor Martin, do you want to put that to Linda?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, when I went to Hamworthy Library, I think one of the issues there was the cost of hiring a room. So I think that's something that we will be looking at in the strategy as a key part of encouraging people in the community and groups in the community to come and use them. And obviously, loads of groups use them already, but we want more groups to come in and be encouraged to use them, rather than, as in the case of Hamworthy, I think, where they were going elsewhere, just down the road, where it was quite a bit cheaper. So I think that's something that is really important that we need to look at. But I don't know whether Linda wants to add to that.
Did you want to add to that, Linda? Are you happy?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, we've got a number of rooms that are used regularly by residents and third-party groups, and it is income generation for the library service. I think what we could do is be better about explaining what those, the size and what those facilities, those rooms have. So that's all part of the plan as well, and making it a bit clearer as to how people can book those. So yeah, that will definitely be a piece in the strategy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waite, please.
Thank you, Steve. I think the point that Councillor Broadhead made highlights how important it is to have consultation plus professional interpretation before you get to a solution, because we all know that consultation results was completely representative. And you said, Sue, didn't you, how physical libraries attract sort of clientele who enjoy that experience. It doesn't necessarily capture people who value digital services, and I believe those people are out there, and it's worthwhile, even if they were a small number of this percentage in the survey. You get things like access to the Oxford English Dictionary, scientific magazines, Radio Times, things that people wouldn't, quite expensive subscriptions if you were to do it privately, but valuable if you're into those things, or studying, or even just like reading knitting magazines.
and actually we should be getting access to the Echo through Borrow Box. I think that is still, you know, in the process of being sorted, but that was sort of part of the deal, wasn't it, that they would take the physical copies out of library, but we at least say to residents, you can get it online. And we've almost gotten in, haven't we, to kind of engage people with those digital services, which are, you know, I think very valuable. Also, just, you know, while I'm on air, just a shout out to lovely Kim at Creekmore Library, who would always make me a hot chocolate when the self-service machine wasn't worth keeping on. You just kind of got to be a bit, you know, get your elbows out to get them to make you a drink.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Canavan, would you like to come up? No. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. There are some members of my group who couldn't be here this evening, and they would never forgive me if I didn't make this contribution towards the library strategy. We did, as a group, make a formal submission as part of the consultation process. So I wanted to absolutely support what Councillor Martin was setting out in terms of the vision around community hubs, because we, you know, as a group, think that's really important. And yes, it was part of our submission that we should have cafes in libraries. You could blame me if you want to. But the just a couple of points I would like to raise, if I may. And I'm sure Councillor Martin and hopefully the officers will forgive me if I continue to push them quite hard on moving to create those community hubs at pace, because they do involve movement of the way in which services can be provided on the part of BCP, and it's about trying to join up those dots and ensuring that residents are able to access a range of services in the same place, because I think that's the direction that we would certainly like to see, and we very much hope that mirrors what is envisaged. My key point, with your permission, Chair, is it's about the timescale. So Councillor Martin referred to, I think, May 2025. So there is a nervousness, and I think I do need to air it, about the next financial year, given, you know, what was discussed earlier on. And we need to get through at least the next financial year without any further alterations to the library service. And I guess we will be looking for some reassurance on that. What I would hate to happen is to get to February and we see the fine detail of the budget, and that we see some cuts in the library service in that budget, not through any lack of attention on anybody's part, but because the pressure on the council is so great. So that's our nervousness about the timescale, and if we can move to a situation where we retain our libraries as is, and try and ensure that they offer that range of services, then I think we'll all have achieved what it is that we set out to achieve. So thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, Councillor Dedman.
Can I just say that I'm a bit concerned at one of the points in here, which is about relocating, or I can't see it now, naturally enough, having brought it up. Oh, potential change of location or co-location of services, merging services. Yes, I understand that, but does that actually mean that you might close some libraries? Change of location, it sort of implies that some of the smaller ones might be shut, or are we safe from that?
Well, I don't think you'd expect me to write the library strategy right here and now, would you? I mean, that's where we're headed next. But I mean, my vision or my ambition is that we retain 24 libraries. Now, where they are, that, you know, it might be that one might move across the road. I'm just speculating. There might be a movement, but actually, you know, it isn't just about the buildings. It is about the service. So you know, you can have a look at if you had a drill down into the data, you can have a look at, you know, which libraries are used more than others. But no, I mean, as I said, I can only tell you what my ambition is that we have 24 libraries that come out of this. Whether they're all in the same place as they are at the minute, that's another matter, and that's where we go back to the whole community hub thing. Can I also just pick up on what Patrick said earlier on? I too share that concern about, which is why I made that remark earlier on about delivering this paper after the fairly gloomy situation about the budget. But I would say, and I would echo what colleagues have already said. The library service has been, and I wrote this down earlier on actually, the library service has been salami sliced for a long time, which is why we are where we are, and I don't see there is no scope left to salami slice the library service anymore, and that's why we're doing this strategy. Thank you.
So Martin, anyone else? Okay, I just want to add a couple of points, and it does actually relate to what you've just said and what Councillor Cavan actually said. Being in a ward where the library there was an attempt to close it down a few years ago, and having fought one very vigorous public campaign to keep it open, it's a matter dear to my heart. But there are a couple of things in this report that do give me some cause for nervousness, and I don't mind admitting it. And in particular on page 463, paragraph 109, which talks about the 532k savings assumed in the current financial year, and its connection with the community hubs. And if you go to paragraph 65, it says through discussion with elected men, is it evident there is a keen desire to retain library services and for there to be investment in them. However, there is no committed funding to realise the vision. Now you can split that paragraph into two and say the current situation or additional funding. This doesn't actually confirm whether the retention of the status quo actually is going to be maintained. So you know that there's a play on words there, and that gives me some genuine cause for concern. You couple that then with the hub development work, which has been in work for a long time, actually, probably too long, because we still don't know what that really means, and there's a connection there. The thing that gave me a little bit of comfort was the timescale, which is after the budget has actually been announced. So I thought, well, that probably indicates, unless something horrible happens between now and May, then the status quo will be maintained for next year. And I hope that is the case. And I'm not going to press you on this, Councillor Martin. I know you're doing your best here, but you undoubtedly are going to be under pressure. The other issue, I suppose, that sort of came to me was the discussion here about the new operating map model and the issue around provision of digital services. And I was trying to get my head around how that really relates in a practical sense to what happens in libraries now. It's very difficult to deliver social value and community assets and value and all the things that councils are now that libraries are now considered to be part of the community, to deliver that through an operating model which relies on the digital services. I can understand that some elements of booking out books and booking and fines and all, that could be done digitally, but the realisation that libraries aren't just about books anymore, that's got long gone. So I do have some concerns about some of the hints in here about the direction in which the library service is going. So I just make those points, and I share Councillor Canavan's views entirely. So anybody else, members? Now there are three fairly straightforward recommendations in here, and I think anybody would probably struggle to disagree with any of them, because they are really just telling us to, if I remember rightly, note the content of the report and the outcomes of the public consultations. I have to say, it's very useful information in there. Brilliant piece of work. Notes and comments on the planned tranches of work to define the service officer and the options appraisal process. Okay, approves the timescales. Well, I think we don't have a problem with that. So, if you're happy with those, we don't necessarily have to make a move to say we support it. But if you are supportive, just if there's any dissent from that, doesn't look like it, then we can pass it on to Cabinet and say that we're content with that. Okay, so I think if we're happy, if we can close that down. And thanks for attending, Linda. It's getting a bit late as well now, so thank you. Thanks,
Chair.
Thanks, Andy. So with that, then we've just got one more item, which is our future work plan.
Yeah, work plan.
What page is that on? Work plan 537. Oh, guess it's right.
Oh, did you say give me a street?
Okay. So, members, the future work plan. Anybody got anything they wish to raise against it? You've all seen it. We've got a fairly full agenda for January, and now we're going to move one of the papers to it. That's the Community Safety Partnership Report. Is there anything you want to add, Claire or Lindsay?
Chair, yes, just want to say thanks to all the board members who voted in the poll on prioritisation of items. There was a clear favourite, and that was the arts and culture funding. So if the board's in agreement, we'll add that to the end of February meeting.
Lovely. Okay, I think it's probably worth mentioning the potential working groups that we've got sort of lined up, because there are a number of them. A new one that I don't think it's on here at the moment, but it may well be that we may end up suggesting we have a working group about looking into the bids. For those of you who attended the presentation the other day, it was a fascinating presentation, very useful, but we need to work our way forward on that for review and scrutiny. The suggestion was we may have at some point have a working group which we can open up to all councillors, and we can invite the bid members themselves to be part of it if they wanted to. So with your agreement, I would like to put that as a potential working group on the list, but we need to prioritise what we're going to have to do here. We've talked about the customer relationship management one, which is another useful piece of work. I don't know if you wanted to mention anything about that, Matty, as you're here.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. There's still quite a lot of work to do on getting the most out of our CRM and linking it to all our other systems so that our customers get the most kind of seamless experience. And we've talked probably on other occasions about how that at times hasn't worked or doesn't work as well as we want it to. So there's still much more work to be done. And you and I talked about some of the issues of online reporting at the moment, which we're currently experiencing. Do you want me to touch on that now, just very briefly? Yeah, so we have a couple of issues that we are working through at the moment in relation to reporting online. One of them is the use of mapping, which is a really great tool for people to notify us of problems that they have found, whether that's a pothole or a tree or whatever issue they want to let us know about. But our current mapping function is through the Bing system. The Microsoft Bing system is not as good as the Google system, and we've had lots of reliability issues. So we're in the process of moving from the Bing system to the Google mapping system, which will hopefully be more reliable and give us more functionality. That will hopefully happen in January. And the other issue, which you I know have experienced particularly, is around when you report issues through the reporting function, but you can't delve into them to get status updates, and you might be doing this on behalf of residents and so on. So you might have a lot of issues you've submitted, but you can't necessarily get into them, and that can be quite confusing if you're trying to see where a particular issue is. And that's a kind of a drawback of the original construction of the system, which was based on what were the most important things we needed to do at that particular time. The team are now working on how we can give more detailed, sort of deeper diving into those issues that you might report, and that will hopefully be done over the next quarter, so a little bit longer because it requires a certain amount of development, IT development. But we take on board that issue, and we recognise the need to be able to give you more opportunity to go into those reported items in more detail, and that will be coming shortly.
Thank you very much. I mean, it was good that we had a very good, forthright conversation the other day about this, and it was good to see that the officers do understand the issues that we've been on about for quite some time. They do understand, and they are in work. There's a plan to address them, so I was quite reassured to get that assurance. So we've got potentially three. Well, now at the moment we don't have a current working group because we did the budget working group. Sorry.
Chair, you do have the public consultation working group that I think you had agreed to move on to next.
Yeah, absolutely. But we haven't convened it yet. That's what I was about to say. But that is the one that I think we're going to
Can
start.
I just say,
with.
the indication from officers is that the best time to start that will be in February. So there is a little bit of a gap between now and the time to begin that working group.
Okay. All right. So
it does. Yeah.
In that case, I think we've probably got time to have a couple of meetings with the bid teams. Maybe.
Chair, if I could...
Everyone's losing the will to live, I see, so I think we're going to move on.
Actually, can I just say something?
You can leave that to us to decide if you want.
About the bid. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have a working group to talk to the bid teams in more detail about what their concerns are. But one thing I noticed when we were talking with them, a lot of the concerns they had, a lot of councillors were sort of going, yeah, I have that problem too. Like, we're not always sure who to talk to, and sometimes we can't get answers and it gets passed around different departments. And so I wondered if maybe after, yes, talk to the bid teams first, but maybe that could follow on from that into another piece of work where we think about how does the council work generally in terms of how we communicate. The officers, sometimes it must be really annoying to them because they've got councillors asking them questions about things and they're really busy with what they've got to do. And is there ways that we could do that better? But I think we should listen to the bids first, because I think that will give us a better handle on what the issue is.
Yeah, I do understand it. I think that's right why the member inquiry system was set up, in order if we were struggling to find someone to talk to about something. And I found generally that they're really very good and very responsive. But I think that, with a huge organisation as ours, it's always going to be problematical getting hold of the right people.
Yes.
And it keeps changing as well. The chief executive, the organisation keeps changing and evolving, and
we could just move that we do some stuff with the bids in the gap in between.
Yeah.
Could I just
maybe?
please, if that's okay?
Do some.
Yeah, go on, Lindsay. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear, you had the briefing with the bids and we set out the parameters of what you wanted from them. At this point, I would need more clarity of what you want to achieve through a working group, so we can send out a key lines of inquiry to you.
Yeah, I can do that. Okay, all right. So we'll do that. I'll put that together, and then we'll try and take that one forward. Okay. Okay, members, if that's it, meeting closed. Thank you very much.